So I guess this is an annual thing. I mean, we've already done a video on season 1 and 2. We did a video on 3 in the first movie. We did a video on the second movie. We did a video on season 4. So, fuck it. I'm going to keep doing this until the end of time.
Or until the series ends. Like I say, you guess this is a regular thing. We've been doing this for 4 years now.
God. My Hero Academia season 5 just ended. MHA is my absolute favorite series, so I want to find any excuse to just chat about it. So that's what we're doing.
But no, Stefan, didn't you know this season was terrible, an absolute disaster, a travesty of animation? I went right for it right at the start.
We sure will.
It's gonna be really ironic. I feel like I'm not one of those stupid people, but I think it's going to be funny if I end up being slightly more negative than you, because I have some words about this, but not like, oh, this is the worst goddamn.
Oh, no, this season has problems, don't get me wrong. It's just one of those, oh my god, the fan base was so fucking annoying this entire time.
We got, really good, we got me, Stefan, we got Ryan here, and we got Jack here.
Hello.
I've got a list of things going through. It's going to be in a slightly unconventional order, but the season did a slightly unconventional order, so fuck it.
It's just how we do.
Quickly, just without really going into any oh, and also we're not going to be doing any manga spoilers by the time this season, by like after this season for season 6 and onward. We're not going to be talking about we might do some little vague hints about stuff.
We'll try to. Sometimes stuff just slips out, unfortunately.
We'll do like vague hints and stuff like that, but we're not going to straight up being this happened and that happened. Oh my god! Remember,
god, Deku got all the Dragon Balls.
Whoa! Can't believe he summoned Exodia.
He passed the Chunin license. I know, right?
Can't believe he won the Soul Society.
Bakugo learned Bankai.
Yeah, so just because season 5 is good. It's going to be like a weird mix of like both. We're going to be reviewing and ranking it based on like the story itself that Kohei Horikoshi originally wrote in the manga that was then translated into the anime, and then also reviewing it as an adaptation of like how did the anime then take that story and do. Yeah, so it is very, season 5 more than most seasons is very much going to be a thing of like we're reviewing on two halves of like, oh, the side of basically the manga, and then the side of how the anime decide to show the manga.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say I'm on both ends. It's like in terms of story, without going in depth right yet on the arcs that this season covered, I'd say it's like it's an okay-ish arc for what it's doing, one of the best arcs of the entire series, and then a pretty good arc. So it's like, so just based on like the story, I would say this is like a good-ish season overall if we're like just looking at it from a storyline perspective.
Yeah.
For the
anime.
From an anime perspective,
Yeah.
I would say like in terms of what this anime season brought to the story, I would say it is honestly, I would agree and say that it might be the weakest season, just because with a couple exceptions, it's just like a lot of, even like the best moments of it kind of feel like the anime didn't do as much as I feel like it could have to really elevate so many elements of of the story, especially like they do some parts like super well, they do some parts even better, but a lot of it is just kind of either middling or slightly worse. So
I'm gonna defend the anime a little bit, if only because it's adapting the weakest arc manga wise, and one of the half arcs it does, there's not a lot to animate. In that sense, there's only so much it can do. Now, the pacing of that said half arc was really bad in the anime, I'm going to say. But it's one of those, it's stuck dealing with a lot of material that's not either super good on its own merits or very tough to make interesting from an animation standpoint.
Yeah, that first arc of season 5 is not like a lot to elevate in that regard.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, when we'll get into the joint training arc, is that I honestly think the anime does it better than the manga.
Interesting.
I think in some ways it does, and there's some ways that I think it's just, I wouldn't say worse than the manga, but on par with it. But yeah, we'll get into that. I do think another thing that we'll get into that I think season 5's biggest question mark is the fact that it's like that everyone was going to be like, okay, you kind of got some middling arcs that you kind of have to like force yourself through, but it also has like what many people consider one of, if not the best arc in the series. And then
Yes.
they kind of do a little, they kind of do weird things with it. So that's why I think a lot of
Yeah.
people are very, but yeah, okay, let's
We'll
jump
get to it when we get to it.
All right, so let's go into stuff that we can actually talk about. The first opening and ending, since that is the first stuff. That's like the easiest, and it's like, oh, it's the first thing, one of the first things you see.
They're okay.
They're fine. Yeah, I don't. For both of them, opening and ending wise, for both halves, I think they're just kind of okay.
I like the imagery of the ED, but that's about it.
I do prefer the EDs this time instead of the openings.
I'd
yeah.
say a number one. I would put like in like the first the opening song. I would put it took me a couple like listens to get, like I listened to it the first time, I'm like, this is okay, and then as I kept listening to it more and more, I'm like, I know, actually I think I pretty like this. It's in my bottom half of openings, but I still
Yeah.
think it's like, oh, it's enjoyable for that. Yeah, the ending I think is really super catchy, and yeah, I love the visuals of the ending. Of just all the kids of Class A just kind of doing their stuff and just like, oh, like going out shopping, chilling in the dorm room.
I appreciate that slice of life aspect.
Yeah. I do like also in the opening, it finally gives everyone a chance to do something compared to most openings where it was previously mostly All Might, or it's stuck with like the top 3 to 5 characters for that arc.
Or you get stuff like the medieval one, or you get the one with just all the girls, and it's like you get like a couple of those, like kind of like big, or you get stuff like the airy one last season and the
Yes.
other last season.
Yeah, but it's like the opening for this one is finally gave everyone in Class A a little action moment in it, which is really nice
Yeah.
to see.
Which is, good for the arc that like does try to give people moments.
Yeah.
I really do need to sit down and listen, because I always listen to I have all the openings on my iPods, well, on my phone, so I listen to them all the time, but I don't have any of the endings. So it's like I only ever listen to the endings when I'm watching the seasons. So I'm like, I need to just sit down and listen to the
I
ending.
think the only ending I have on my music player is the medieval one, just because that's Lisa.
That's right, that is Lisa. Oh god, yeah, I love her music. I'm like, yeah, I should listen to that again. All right, so yeah, pretty good for opening stuff.
They're
Yeah,
fine.
nothing-
They serve their function as openings and endings. Unfortunately, it was also coming right after
Star Maker.
Star Maker, but also Jujutsu Kaisen's openings,
right.
Yeah.
which were on fucking point both times.
It's kind of a hard act to follow.
All right, so just first thing we can really quickly talk about is just ever since season 3, it's kind of been like their thing of like, oh, we're gonna have like the first episode kind of be a filler like catch up. So it's like, oh, people watching, like it's meant for like people like watching on TV to be like, oh, here's like a catch up of what happened last.
Yeah.
Here's something people need to understand that a lot of internet dwellers don't freaking understand because they don't actually delve deep in anything beyond surface level. Japan does not rerun things almost ever. So you have to remember, a lot of the kids watching in Japan haven't seen this show in a year. They might read the manga, they might not. So this is for television watchers in Japan to give a very quick, brief episode recap of everyone and their powers and what's going on. This is not for streaming. This is an episode not meant for streaming services or super nerds like us.
And I think season 4 and 5 did like, I think the best, because season 3 was literally just a clip show of just, now we're gonna skip back to see, we're gonna have like a really awesome funny story that's like 5 minutes of the episode, and the other 15 is just literal clips, and it's like, that's boring. But
I love PowerPoint.
Oh, you love Promised Neverland season 2, though.
Oh man, it's my favorite.
so but season 4 and 5 do like a nice thing of like, rather than it being like a straight clip show, it's like season 4 is like, okay, like the biggest thing that happened last season was All Might's retirement, so we're kind of like, remember when that happened. And this one, it's remember when Endeavor fought the giant Nomu. So you kind of have, that's like the only big like flashback they have, and the rest of it's just kind of like, here's Class 1A doing their things, and we kind of like reintroduce like who everybody in Class 1A is. So like in this one, like what I think I like season 4 is a bit more, just because I like the grounded story they have of the photographer showing up to school, kind of seeing it from the outsider's perspective, and you have the thing of like him trying to figure out who All Might's successor is. Well, this one's just kind of a more simple of, oh, 1A are doing they're doing a little like exercise, and Nejire and Tamaki are villains who they're fighting, and Mirio's like a civilian that they got to rescue. So it's a very simple setup.
Log, it's big, it's heavy, it's wood. Log, it's actually Mirio.
My favorite part was when Mirio said, haha, I'm in danger.
And then he just falls in the river again.
Yeah, I feel like as the episode itself is just kind of very but it's like it has Mirio doing that, and then it has Tamaki just going, I want to go home.
For that alone, I think I would put it above the rest of the fillers.
Yeah, I would agree, generally speaking. As an aside, I do appreciate that Aaron Daisuke still gets work.
Oh yeah, I love his
He's
vote.
Tamaki.
I love his I love him as the main dude in the Kaguya dub. Like he's perfect in that. I love and Senku and Dr. Stone. He's amazing.
I mean, I'm old enough to remember when he was a wee lad of like 12 or 13 in FMA, so...
Yeah, and I do think, like, even though I think the actual... I feel like they could have done more with the big three as villains that 1A has to fight.
It's there to be a gag thing more than anything else.
Yeah,
so.
no, and also because they at least... I like that they give, like, every single person in class 1A gets, like, a moment, like, be like, oh, this person does something, and then it shows this is who they are. And it's like, it's not just simply being like, oh, we just got to run through everybody. Like, everybody gets, like, one thing to do, and it's one thing that, like, oh, they'd be good at doing. So it's a good way of, like, having everybody... Which is kind of, like, a good, like, a description of this season, which is that, oh, they're trying to give as many people like their moments. It's like, even if it's a small moment, as many people as possible they want to give a moment.
Yeah,
I think season 5 more than any other season, I think, really kind of like solidifies that, like, we're trying to give everybody. Yeah,
this was when the story was running out of steam in some regards, and it was desperately trying to find the next Todoroki to maybe kind of jolt it in the arm some, which is why they brought back a fan favorite at the joint training, but we'll get to that.
All right, and then because then after that is they kind of do some pro hero arc catch up, because the last season kind of like had to stop abruptly because they ran out of episodes. So the next episode is basically just kind of catching up and finishing that stuff. But I'm gonna put a pin in 2 of the 3 big things that happen in that episode, because they're both come back in major ways. So I'm just gonna do the third thing, which is Hawks. And I want to say is that I remember, because I was reading the manga as it was coming out, like at this point back in 2018. And I remember, like, when Hawks first appeared, I think I even said this in the last video, that when Hawks first appeared, I'm like, there's something fishy about this guy. I don't really trust him. And then you get to the end of the arc, and then you have the chapter.
I was gonna say,
you have the chapter where the Endeavor's in the hospital, and then Hawks goes to see Dobby, and he's like, oh, we set the... I'm like, holy shit, Hawks is working for the League. And then 5 pages later in the same chapter, and it's like, oh, the Public Safety Commission's like, go spy on the League of Villains, and I'm like, what? It's
Triple
like normal.
cross.
it's more like the instant he showed up, he became a fan favorite. So I wonder what Hori was thinking, whether or not he would go one way or the other, just kind of depending on fan reaction.
I think it's like, because normally in, like, I mean, series like that, like, you would think that, like, oh, Hawks working for the League of Villains is like an end chapter surprise, and it's like, oh my god, and then you come back next week, then it's like, oh no, he's not for the League, he's a double agent. But the fact that they did it in one, like, in the same episode / chapter, I think that's such a genius move, just because it's like, it just makes you want to keep guessing of, like, okay, what exactly, like, is Hawks doing? Like, what's his plan? What is he going to try to do? Especially when, like, once you get, like, later on in the season and you see, like, the more stuff that he does and what he ends up doing, and you're like, well, how far is it is one of the things, like, what I always thought about Hawk is that every single time he shows up, he becomes a more interesting character, just because whatever he says, whatever he does, whatever moves he makes in, like, the chessboard of the plot, I'm always like, I want to see more of this guy, and I want to see, like, I never fell in love with him as much as everybody else did, but every time, like, I want to see what he's gonna do next.
I'd agree. Hawks is a good boy. Sometimes.
All right, now we can just go right into it's one of the kind of quote unquote controversial, because I don't think it's super controversial, but it's like, it's kind of controversial in the joint training arc, as it's known.
Okay, so another thing a lot of people don't really know is that during the joint training arc, Horikoshi was very sick for like 2 weeks. He was also moving at the time because his dinky apartment wasn't good enough for all the staff he needed for fact that the series was now super mega popular now, so he had to oversee vigilantes and was doing stuff for the movies, so he was moving. So it's like between moving, the hellish work schedule a mangaka usually has, and being sick, it's no surprising this arc kind of falls apart in many regards.
Like, I believe it is not counting the overhaul arc and the war arc, which happens the most recent arc that just concluded. The joint training arc is the longest arc in the series at 25 chapters, but also most of those chapters are like 10 to 13 pages long.
Yes.
So and
Yeah,
they're
he-
all
he was-
action based. So it's a thing of like reading it as it was coming out was a very like kind of big slog and like has very weird pacing issues.
Yeah, this is where I dropped off with the manga before I picked it back up again.
Yeah, so it's one of those. This is where the anime really picks up the slack in a lot of regards.
In some ways, because I feel like
I'd say in most ways, to be perfectly honest with you.
the joint training arc itself in the anime is, I believe, 10 episodes long, which even then that is still one of the longer
It's
episode arcs. And I honestly feel like it could have been shorter because a lot of the episodes, especially the first two fights, have very, very big use on flashbacking to other episodes. And like MHA is kind of guilty of doing this all the time, of just they need to waste some time of animation time, so they'll cut back to episodes and like the same episode and just, oh, here's the scene again.
That's an unfortunate complication of, again, it's you don't rerun things in Japan. It's unfortunately an aspect of their medium that dates back to the frickin' 70s. It's just something you just kind of have to unfortunately put up with. Now, could they do it better? Of course. It's just one of those, you gotta understand the context in which they're working here.
Yeah, like it's not inherently a problem, especially because I know, like, especially in the first couple seasons, because I was like, all right, they're doing this also to save money, so that when we get to the good shit, it's like, oh, they put all of their time and effort into those parts, so it like kind of made it like worth it.
Yes.
But I do think like the pace, like just the because of how long a lot of those flashbacks were, the pacing kind of like felt like ruined in a way. So it's like, those fights ended up being like two full episodes, but I'm like, they probably could have been like one episode or an episode and a half.
It didn't need to be this long.
Yeah, it's like you could have put in the first two and condensed them into one episode. That would have been fine. But I think the rest is, generally speaking, good.
I think it's also a big thing of like, it's not a plot arc. It's like the arc is
No, it functionally speaking is completely irrelevant aside from one thing.
the arc, other than that big thing, it's primarily there for three specific reasons. One, to give Class 1A, the rest of Class 1A, the chance to show like how they've improved. Because the big thing is like back during season 4 with the overall arc, it's like you pretty much just only focused on Midoriya, Uraraka, Kirishima, Tsuyu, and then Bakugo and Todoroki kind of had their little thing.
Yes.
Other than that, everybody else just kind of got character stuff and not really action hero things.
It was very minor.
Yeah, so what now that you got, now like with this arc lets you be like, okay, now all of 1A has a chance, every single member has a chance to be like, they get to do something. So you get to see them do a new super move, do like shows their new fighting skills, like do something. And then
unfortunately, the first one's kind of a nothing fight in a lot of regards. The Momo team is good, not for them, but because 1B really shines in that episode. the big problem is that like they try to make Momo smarter than she is, and she's like, no, she gets outclassed the entire time.
well, and that was the second thing that this arc is doing is letting you actually get to know 1B. Because the big thing is that 1B, like outside of like Tetsu, Monoma, and Kendo, the rest of 1B were just kind of like, you saw their faces, you maybe saw their names. If you looked in a data book, you know what their quirk was.
They
But
sure were background characters.
you don't know. So this gives them to be like, okay, like they are there. You want to know who they are. It's like without really needing to give them like an actual like deep story. It's like, here's an arc where they can fight, so you can be like, okay, this is how they fight, this is how they problem solve, and it's like it gives you that opportunity just to be like, okay, this is who this character are. Do you like them? Well, they're not going to be a big deal, so it's like you can just kind of see them do something cool and then move on. You don't have to be invested in them.
The standout from 1B popularity wise, and it shows in extra images in the manga, was Mushroom Girl.
Hinoko. and then the third one is of course Shinzo, because people really love
Well,
Shinzo.
We'll get to Shinjo once he becomes more relevant in things, because he's there in the first fight, and the first fight is there purely just to make him look competent, which is fine. It's just unfortunately it kind of comes at the expense of making the 1A people there not matter that much.
Yeah, if you want, we can just go like just one by one. So like the first fight, which is like it's just kind of used like at the very beginning is that they just kind of throw Kirishima out of the way because they're basically like, you already had your spotlight, get out of here.
You see, that bums me out.
Yeah, basically.
I get that he's already had a spotlight, which makes sense. It's just Kirishima's my favorite.
And then they also obviously have Sue there, but Sue gets enough screen time as it is, so I think he did a decent enough job of pairing the two characters that already get a lot of spotlight to step aside and let Shinzo have his time.
Yeah, it's kind of like a lot of like it's a lot of like common. It's a lot like pretty much it's Tsuyu kind of being like the planner, and then you have kind of Kaminari who's kind of like trying to kind of he's trying to be the planner, but is like he's kind of slowing down, but he's trying to keep up. Like he's doing the Kaminari thing of like okay.
Yeah, Kaminari also gets a few little minor moments here and there, so again, it's okay. He's acquiescing a little bit to Shinzo.
You have that one shot where just one animator is like, you know what? I'm just gonna go fucking baller with this shot when he gets grabbed and then electrocutes them. Where like everybody's mouth's movement is surprisingly smooth. And it's like, with just this one shot, somebody was just like,
I'm gonna go fucking nuts.
yeah, because then like the rest of the fight, yeah, because it's like, I mean, there isn't a lot of like fancy stuff to like kind of really like highlight unless they were to like to add some things. So they just well, I mean they do add a couple things. Like there is like an extended scene where like Shinzo faces off against a big beast guy that wasn't in the manga, like at the very end of the fight. But it's like they do try to like give it some like extra. Like, I do like Beast just because it's like he looks like he's just a big dumb guy, but he's actually very like intelligent and smart, and he has like a big he has a kind of like a smartish like kind of like speech.
Yeah. I mean, he's very much just Beast from X-Men, but a little bit of the problem that we get into very early on, including this fight, is that 1B is mostly a lot of support quirks, which leads to a lot of fairly awkward one-sided fights. So you usually have like one person on any 1B team who's super dangerous, and the rest are just kind of there to help them out, rather than have a particularly interesting fight scene. Now, that's not strictly the case, because we'll get to the Ida team later. But unfortunately, it results in a lot of awkward fight choreography, where you just have a lot of 1B guys just kind of running around.
I do love Ibarra whenever they can bring in Ibarra to just say some godly praises. I'm just like, she's so funny. She always makes me laugh.
And so we move on to the second fight?
Yes.
This one bugged me, if only because it kept singing Momo's praises as she gets her ass beat the entire time. And not just in terms of losing a fight to Kendo, but just getting outmaneuvered in every way possible.
I think the whole thing that it's trying to get, because the whole thing is that it's trying to go for is that Momo, is that Momo's trying to like, she's trying to outsmart, although, because she's trying to outsmart them, but really it's just like, she distracts Kendo away. She lets basically them kind of destroy the field like themselves. Like let greatest character ever Manga Fukudashi
I was about to
unload with kanjis everywhere.
Oh god, I love him. He's so good.
And then she gives Tokoyami her lucky bag, which he can then use to basically just combat almost pretty much everybody. And then they do that, like, because it's like they would have won if just for the one thing. But it's like first, before we get to that, I want to talk about it, because at least I do like all the stuff like with Tokoyami, and like all the the backstory with his internship with Hawks, how it leads to him like unlocking his new special move, his like rivalry with Kurihiro. It's just like everything with Tokoyami I loved in this fight.
I love that his flying looks stupid as hell.
It's great. He's covering up in a cape and he's like going, so it's not like he's like actually flying. It's kind of like he's like gliding in the air. Like
it's not, he's not flying, he's carrying himself.
He's falling with style.
No, it's not that. He is based on the fact that how his Dark Shadow works, he's literally just carrying himself in the air. That's all he's doing, and it's hilarious.
I remember in the, because it was in Heroes Rising when he's flying, he's like has his arms out like with thing, and I was like, oh, he's basically like Knuckles. He's just kind of gliding downwards. But yeah, it's like
Kinda.
I like that. Yeah, I love like just Kurihiro being like being this completely edgy ass and just trying to like outmaneuver and petty Tokuyami. But then when it comes to Kinoko, he's just like, oh yeah, she praised me. It's like yeah. He's just completely blushing over.
I love that Kinoko's eyes are shiitake mushrooms.
Best character design.
She's also the fucking scariest one of the group.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember when that happened. It's like, oh, he defeats her, everything's all good, and then she's just like, I'm just gonna put mushrooms in your lungs, and it's like, what? And then he starts choking, and it's
up.
like, oh god, you're gonna kill him.
She's like, yeah, I kind of have to hold back or I'd kill everyone here.
I'm surprised she didn't make it farther in the sports festival.
Probably because, again, you go any further and you risk killing someone.
That's like Sue Storm in putting a force field inside of your heart, like levels of Jesus.
Sure.
And then she ends with just being like, "You want a lozenge?" Yeah, because because the whole thing with the ending is like, Kendo beats the shit out of Momo, but it still ends with her being like, "I don't think I beat her."
I like that it was a close fight.
Except it was close, but Kendo just clearly had a better plan. Momo was just reactionary the entire time. So it's like the weakest part is just Momo didn't get to do anything interesting. She's just like, oh, we're going to sing her praises even though she's not doing anything.
Although even though like a lot because I've like always like gone back to it, just kind of like look over like just when I was reading it, just because I would be like, what is it like the whole thing with like Kendo and Momo, because it's like, oh, Kendo's like he's like, oh, like everybody praise, she's like, everybody praises me like because we were together like at the internship, but I don't think I'm nearly as good as you, so I want to do this to kind of prove that I'm better than you. And then it's like,
And then she did. So
But they didn't really do anything in the internship, so it's like,
I think it's more so she was kind of came as a pair with Momo. So it's just like, oh, it's Momo and Kendo from 1A who worked under what's her name.
I think it is a good kind of reversal, because Momo's whole arc for most of the time was her being really insecure about her like abilities as like just in general. So this idea is that by now it's like Kendo's the one who's kind of insecure, and Momo's like, even though like, yeah, if she does like lose, it's like she's still like, she's very like, she's confident. She's never like second guessing herself the entire time. She's like, okay, I feel like it's less about like being like, oh, like singing Momo's praises, more so be like, oh, now like, unlike say like back in like the final exams when she's like questioning herself the entire time, now Momo's like, okay, I'm gonna do this thing, whether it works or succeeds, I don't know, but I'm just gonna do it.
yeah. I will say, I think like there's a future arc that I think does like Momo justice.
Yeah. All right, so on to Battle 3, aka the series did not necessarily need to go that hard.
the one this if there's one thing season 5 did, it's this. And it's like, this was a fight that I'm like, oh yeah, it was a good, just like all the joint training fights, I'm like, it was a good fight. But then the anime just goes, you know what would be cool? Ida breaking the sound barrier.
It's like, what would be cool if Ida was relevant again?
It's like it is insane, like how close it is to the level of the movie, the climax of movie 2. It is just so good.
And it's not even just Ida. Then it's like it's Todoroki and Tetsu, like Todoroki's flames just going ablaze everywhere, and just Tetsu taking it all like crazy. Just and the destruction of the entire stadium. You get like all like,
It's
you
like
get all
weird,
the weird.
it's a really freaking out of like, oh, they go into the previous fight. It's like, oh, Kendo and Momo are the players. It's like, no, Mudman seems to outsmart both of them.
Yeah, Juju's also the really, and I love his kind of like the interplay with Pony, and how like he's also multilingual, so he can speak with her in English.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that fight, like that fight ends up being like, I would say in my top 10 favorite like MHA fights of all time, just because of like it. I was not expecting how hard they were going to go on it, and it's just like I've rewatched that like a bunch of times. Like it is just genuinely just a really fun and just like cool match.
I also like that it ends in a draw. That one's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Especially because you have like, and then like you have stuff like all the, you have the Ida side when he like thinks back to like be like, oh yeah, I had to like pull out my engines and like re-put them in with new ones in order to go faster. Or you have like Todoroki being like, okay, let me see if can I use my fire and ice at the same time, and like try, and it's like he's trying to do the thing of like, oh, I need it. It's where like the Endeavor stuff that kind of that again gets brought back up later, of the whole thing of like, oh, I've been training so much with my ice, I haven't really done my fire as much as it should be. So it's like
Mhm.
his fire is kind of all over the place, and you see him trying to kind of be in more control. And then Tetsu's just like, I'm just gonna take everything.
Well, he's a special wall, so
I forget if it's in the anime, the manga, or somewhere, or the dub, but it's like in one of them when he punches Shoto, he screams "My fist," which is because his super move is technically steel fist, but
Mhm.
in one of those they translated it to say "My fist." Which I just wish that like that, and just the idea that he has his move is that he punches with his steel arm and goes "My fist."
I think the only character that's really underutilized in this fight is Pony, but that's also just because I think she's kind of just mostly a joke character.
Yeah, she speaks English. That's the joke.
Yeah.
I like that they gave. I like that Sarah Wiedenhart, Sarah Wiedenheft voices her in the dub. I always love her voice.
I like that one too.
Yeah. Oh, and
Yeah.
Ojiro. Everybody forgets about Ojiro. Mr. Plain.
Well, because he doesn't matter to anything. I know it's the joke, but it's like, At least I remember him more than Sugar Rush, but
Yeah.
Oh, and there's also no, because there's also Shoji, and then because the whole Pony's whole thing is like it's like ew, ew, you look scary. I don't like octopus, and it's like racist. Like Shoji hides his mask, but people are scared. He puts on a mask because people are scared of him. It's like, come on, that's rude. I get you're American, but still,
Also, you're like a part horse. Like, speak for yourself.
yeah. So yeah, after that fight, then you get Mr. Bakugo's reigning supreme.
It was definitely a good fight.
yeah, it was good, and I like the theming that it continues the stuff going on with the band with Jiro.
Mhm.
Because people didn't think through this very much at the time, but it's like, you have to understand from a music perspective, the drummer is the one who sets the tone. He sets the speed for the track, and everyone has to match his speed. Now, the drummer's job is to make sure to be at a speed everyone can play at and how the song is supposed to work. But that is his job. What is Bakugo's role in any group dynamic? He is the guy in charge. That's his shtick. He's confident, he's brash, but he knows what he's doing. So everyone ultimately has to match his pace. But he's not, banging on the drums wildly anymore. He's controlled and knows, hey, I can't just do whatever I want. We're playing in a quote-unquote band. So I have to set a pace that people can actually match.
Yeah, that is something I appreciate about Bakugo going forward, especially after this arc, is controlled chaos
Yeah.
with just him in general.
It's also the thing of when you really if you look back in the series, this is truly his first actual 100% win. Every single other time that he quote unquote won is there's always been some kind of caveat. He either loses or there's a caveat where it's well, it isn't technically a win or he doesn't consider it a win. But it's with this one, the first when he's actually being okay, I'm gonna go forward and I'm just gonna go nuts. If you guys are in trouble, I'll run back and help you. And if I'm in trouble, you run back. It's a very simple tactic, but it's one that's super useful just because
Yes.
it's just have the powerhouse go crazy. If he sees people in trouble, he'll go out of the way to help you, then go back. If he gets in trouble because of it, then you just come in and help him, and then he'll just keep going. It's like a runaway train, basically.
Yeah, it plays to his strengths, which is it's very cathartic, especially for this point in the series with how many chapters or how many episodes. Wow, here's a win for Bakugo that feels surprisingly well done.
Yeah, and as someone who for the longest time was just not caring for Bakugo, I remember when I read that and when I was even when I was watching the anime and just how the animation it isn't on par with Battle 3, but the animation's still very good in this battle, and just the way it's everything's paced and all that. I was even being yes, I was fist bumping and be yes, go. Yeah, and especially since the whole point of this battle is how fast it goes, so the pacing in this battle is super quick, especially in comparison to 1 and 2's fights. So it's that's very glad. It's very glad for that too.
Yeah, I'm just glad that Hori came up with a way to keep Bakugo the character that he still functionally was at the start, but in a way that's not only functional, but also in a way that's also more endearing. Not in the sense that, he's a lovable scamp. It's more that his brashness and confidence is a necessary requirement for the job he's trying to, get into. what does All Might do? He is loud, he is attention seeking, he is all eyes on me, I am here, I am going to save the day, sort of thing. What is Bakugo trying to do but that? Obviously, he needs to work on it to be better, but his persona is based on that. Now we're seeing it in a way that's more productive rather than just, I'm better than you, fucking bow down to me.
The only disappointing thing about the fight is that because the whole thing is supposed to be just a Bakugo wash, that Tokage kind of gets wasted, because it's like, oh, Tokage is such a cool design, and it's like she has such like a real like a cool idea for a quirk, and then the whole thing's like, oh, she's like the other recommendation student, so she's supposed to be really good, but it's like, no, she just kind of gets washed, because the whole thing is like, oh, they didn't expect Bakugo, to quote Monoma, he didn't expect them to have character development.
Also, I appreciate both Jiro and Suro having something to do in a combat situation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I like how they're surprising. I mean, I think it's funny is that the closest thing to a girl I could consider shipping Bakugo with is Jiro. Because if you really look at how many like moments, interactions they have with them, like, you know what? Yeah, Jiro is kind of like the one girl here that Bakugo kind of like has some kind of like closeness, the closest as far as he can go. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of weird.
Well, I think it helps. I think it helps that she has an ability that Bakugo just can't really do anything about. So he's kind of forced to rely on her specialties, kind of no matter what.
I know he like it's like a thing where he does respect Momo. It's like thing like, oh, he recognizes like how smart Momo is and how useful her quirk is. It's just the thing of like, oh, he just doesn't like he doesn't have a reason to interact with her.
He doesn't have a reason to interact with her, and it's one of those. If he were to go into a fight with her, he would just win. Because Momo might be a bit smarter than him, but it's one of those. He can handle anything that Momo can, but probably better for the most part.
Yeah, he also could win easily win a fight against Jiro. It's just a thing of like,
sure,
yeah.
but that's not. But Jiro's not a combat person. She is there to serve a completely different role, and as shown in this, joint battles, that he's gonna, when the situation calls for it, he just straight up has to rely on her. He can't just do whatever he wants. So
yeah, like I really like the part where his arms are all like they're all like tied up, they're all like connected by those cylinder blocks, and then Sato comes in and just punches the thing. He's just like, get out of here and just go.
Hey, Sugar Rush, he got to do one thing for the first time in the series.
I can imagine it was very cathartic for him to punch Bakugo repeatedly.
Getting slightly tougher doesn't mean much when you have Exploding Man and a guy whose power is to literally just be stronger than everyone else.
I like in the School Briefs novels, they really highlight his baking. And there's thing because since Bakugo is also good at baking, him and Sato kind of have like a very good repertoire in those books. And it's just kind of a funny thing to be like, and like all the girls like look to him for like advice on like cooking. It's like for that side of him, like I think it's really funny just like seeing like him. So yeah, so now we can go into the fifth and final the battle. Which before all like the big stuff happens, we can kind of talk, since we didn't really even talk about Shinzo and just kind of like his whole role, how like he's basically there to be the mini Aizawa. He's got the capturing weapon. He's got a new thing. He has Persona 6 on his mouth.
Yes, he's finally back after so long.
Yeah, I do like the whole making him be this group's, this generation's Aizawa compared to actual Aizawa. I think the problem was that he was setting him up to be more relevant, and then it's like, oh right, we need to do all the plot stuff now. Sorry, Shinzo, you're back on a bus again.
Yeah, it's kind of like Eri and Recovery Girl. We know why you're here. You gotta wait a little bit.
Although you say, Eri does have like a pretty.
Yeah, she does, but it's like,
yeah, Eri's been around.
Yeah,
but Shinzo is definitely the thing. I feel like this isn't spoilers, but it's like, yeah, Shinzo hasn't come back yet. Like, it is very clear that he's gonna come back, especially since there was an art piece that Horikoshi wrote that they drew recently of all the characters and also Shinzo in a hero costume. So it's like, yeah, Shinzo's coming back, and obviously, if this arc, if he didn't come back, this arc would be like completely pointless. But it's like, yeah, like they need to give like
setting the seeds.
Shinzo's too popular to keep away.
They needed to give a reason. Yeah, they wanted to bring Shinzo back after the sports festival, and they wanted to give a reason why he will eventually be able to help them in the big stuff. So it's like, yeah, here's him kind of showing that he can stand beside them and get his acceptance into the hero course. I do like his like the more mature personality that he's kind of like developed since like being taught by Aizawa, because like the whole thing like in the sports festival he's just like, I'm just gonna be a complete dick to everybody just because I need to be a complete dick to go through. And then like when he has a conversation with Monoma, and Monema's like, yes, sometimes we got to do non-heroic things in order for us to get by in this. And Shin's like, I don't really want to do that, but he's like, he understands, but he's also like, I want to try to see if I can like be better.
Like
and,
your
like,
powers, your powers based on deception. You kind of have to.
kind of well yeah, I mean yeah, but it's also, I mean, it's, you can be deceptive, but also like without without being a dick about it, without being like, oh, I'm gonna
Sort of. It's one of those. His strategy in the sports festival was the correct one. Your job is to get them to respond to you, to use your power. The best way to do that is to just be a dick and goad them into it. So it's not it's not nice, but it's you got to try to get the job done.
Yeah, which is like his whole. I mean, which is like his whole thing. I mean, in both of the fights, because it's like he's doing. It's more so like in terms like teamwork, because it's like the when he first like introduces himself, he's like, I'm only here to win. He's like, they say he's like, they remind him of Proto Todoroki, and Shoto just kind of has he has this dumbfounded face of really. So it's like, yeah, it's that thing, but then it's like when he's in the thing, and Kaminari is like being very like happy-go-lucky. He's like, come on, I like you, man. Come on, let's do this. So he starts being like, okay, let me let my guard down a bit, because like, I mean, it's kind of like, again, the Bako thing. Like Bako needs to learn to like, be more accepting of people and like work together. Then Shinzo also needs to be like, oh yeah, I also need to let my guard down and like be able to like put the trust in helping people along
Character
with
development.
Yeah, I don't think it's strictly that. I think it's more a matter of he obviously has his own little inferiority complex by not getting in the first time into UA. I think it's also just he doesn't want to strictly make friends at that point, because it's like he needs to focus on his job more so than getting to know them. It's more the thing he's prioritizing more than anything else, which is a thing that is part of the whole team up exercise is supposed to go, because teachers are like, okay, yeah, we're doing it randomly because you're not going to just get to be with people you like, and you're just going to have to deal with that. So that is what it is. So shall we move on to the big aspect of this whole end of the arc?
Yeah. All right. So first, I'm going to go and grab that pin, the first pin. I'm going to pull it out. So like right before the joint arc, which is what ended the last season, and then they kind of had to do some weird timey-wimey and went back to it. Deku has a dream about One for All and All for One, where you get to see get to see a lot of like really like cool, a lot of like cool, interesting lore stuff about like the history like before One for All was created, when All for One was, when he was basically like the mafia boss of like the world, of like, oh, look at this guy. This guy was being bullied because he has a weird quirk, and this guy got harassed because he doesn't have a quirk. Well, I'm gonna take a quirk away from you and give it to this guy. And look,
shut up, Lex Luthor.
All you got to do is just if I call you, come by. And they're all like, yes. And he's like, see, I'm fixing the world. And his brother's like, no, you're not. It's like you're doing this all for power. And he's like, yeah, you're right. Oh well. It's like he doesn't even.
Again, this is All for One's most Lex Luthor-y.
And John Swasey, who is the English voice of All for One, I think is just absolutely perfect.
He's so good.
Basically, you need another villain guy. That's who Funimation calls.
Yeah,
because he's a father in FMA. He's Hades in Fairy Tail. What other? Oh, he was Crocodile in One Piece.
He has that very commanding voice. It's both commanding but also kind of charismatic in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, yeah, I think it fits that super well. And then you get the first big shot of like all of the other previous One for All users. So you get to see all except for two.
We'll save those for later.
In the future,
much later.
Yeah. In those, yeah, you get to see them, and then Midoriya wakes up, and then during the training battle, black stuff comes out of him. Wait.
I'm not the biggest fan of this plot twist, if only because I feel it goes a little bit into Naruto territory where the main character is given too much power, not of his own real volition. Now, obviously, they make Deku work for it a lot more than Naruto ever has to. But it's one of those, the premise is, anyone can be your hero. It's like, but you're also given a power that we find out later literally gives you like multiple powers. You're ridiculously overpowered now, Deku. Sorry.
What I will argue is that, so yeah, the answer, the thing is that first I want to say that the black whip scene, I think like that was one of my favorite scenes in the manga when that happened. I think it's done really well.
Oh my gosh,
here.
it's so
it's just like
wild.
just like it going crazy. I love like Midoriya's being swung all over the place. He runs in front of Shinzo, and he's just screaming Shinzo, stop, and Shinzo just has this scared what the fuck look on his face. And it's I think that scene is super great.
It's very well done.
Ochako gets her gets her big save.
Just kiss you too.
She gets her and she hugs, but she also gets to slap him, which is that wasn't in the manga, because I remember that wasn't in the manga where because they're like, in order to stop him, they get Shinzo to brainwash him, and in the anime in the manga he just kind of wakes up. In the anime she slaps him awake. So it's like, this is the second time she slapped him to save him. So it's like, we gotta wait for the third time. Third
time's the charm.
But yeah, it's like, yeah, because then Ochako, she has like the great moment where like she's like thinking back on her past and like watching people watch heroes, and it's like her whole thing is like, oh, who is there to help heroes when they need saving? So it's like, now it's that whole thing of like, oh, now she wants to be like the person who helps out her fellow heroes. And then this leads into the revelation where we meet Hellboy.
Yeah, he's just Hellboy.
Although we learn, we can say it because they say at the end of the season his name's Banjo.
Oh yeah.
Banjo and Kazooie.
I love Banjo. Like, he not only he has such a cool design, but also I think he's a really, for the few times we do see him, he's a really fun like character, and it's just like, yeah, dude, we got him. We see Nana, we see the first user, we see two other guys, which won't say more for now, but it's like, yeah, you see that.
I do like how they gave the big scary looking guy like the most passive quirk of the bunch. Mostly just because the Black Whip is a restraining quirk, or at most you swing around with it. It's not a power quirk at all.
Although it is kind of a thing where it's like, you gotta like make sure your emotions are in check, or else Black Whip will go crazy. And as shown in this fight, and as shown, like, no spoilers, but later, Black Whip can get pretty crazy when you're.
Well, that's because because it's powered up by One for All, not on its own. On its own, it's a very simple quirk.
True. Yeah, it's like you get that, and then you learn that he's gonna have the six quirks of the six previous users who had quirks. So it's like, yeah, so that was the big controversial thing of like, oh, Deku's gonna get six quirks. I will say that in the context of this season and these sections of the story, I'm fine with it. Like I do like it, just because I do think it fits in with the whole. I mean, it makes sense in the fact that One for All passed on, and like the
it logically it makes sense. It's just more thematically I don't like it.
I feel like later in the manga, Horikoshi kind of brings it around to being the whole idea of having like One for All being multiple quirks. He kind of makes it better in a way, but again, can't really say much.
He improves it. Yeah, it's like he definitely improved on it. It's just one of those thematically I don't think it works, and its debut as a concept kind of in some ways fell flat on its face to me. It's like, oh, we're giving the already in many ways overpowered MC, not actually initially, but as he controls it, he gets more and more powerful. It's like we're giving a character who's already probably top 3 in the class power-wise even more. It's like, can we please not turn this into like a typical Naruto or Bleach or something where just everyone but the MC sucks?
I think at least like I think thematically, just as the whole idea is that it's less about like, now I think it's less about like, he's going to become so stronger, he's going to eclipse everybody else. It's more so about kind of putting on more responsibility. Like the whole idea with One for All is that you have this superpower like that you have, and it's like, oh yeah, and you're also going to have to match this power so you can defeat the most evilest evil that has ever existed. So it's like there's that responsibility of like, oh, I just don't have to be the strongest just because I want to be. It's I need to be. And now it's like now you got these other extra quirks, and it's like, oh, now I feel like I have a responsibility to master it for the legacy of One for All. So there is kind of this thing of like, oh, just like the whole idea of legacy is a big theme in My Hero, and I think that kind of like
Yes.
adds on to it. My like this isn't my personal gripe with the quirks is that the later quirk, again without spoiling, they kind of come in a bit too fast later on. Like they get introduced like a couple of them get introduced like bam, bam, bam. And
Yeah.
it's like
yeah, it's one of those. Oh, he hasn't mastered them. It's like, but he's got kind of the hang of them really quickly.
yeah, I think that's like the only like major like again like I think the fact that he has them and like what we learn like what they are later, it's like I'm perfectly fine with that, and I like just that having it. But yeah, I do think the fact that the biggest problem I have with it is something that comes much later. So it's like I don't think it's
We
like
can't really
I
talk
don't
about
need
it
to
yet.
yeah, we don't need to
Yeah, we'll put a pin in that for later.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think yeah, just like Black Whip is generally like one of my absolute favorite quirks, and just seeing it like just like when he does like whip it out and pull pull the Black
I
Whip.
do like how Sarah points out that it basically makes him pointless.
He's become Venom.
See you later, Scotch tape.
Kind of. So I guess that I would say that's basically the end for the joint training arc.
Yeah, it was fine.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, the anime just does it better.
I do. I think other than like again like the stuff like like the third and fourth, other than like the third and fourth battle and like, I say other than the third and fourth battle, I would say the arc is just kind of like I honestly I would say it's about on par with the manga, just because again I think the pacing in a lot of like the episodes is just it isn't like I feel like if they fixed a lot of the
It
pacing,
didn't need to be 10.
yeah, if they fix the pacing, I think this definitely could have been like, yeah, definitely better than the manga. But as far, I feel like they both kind of have weird pacing issues, so that's why I think like overall, I think it's just it's an okay arc that does what it needs to do very well in both the anime and the manga.
No, I still say the anime does it better, just on the nature of one, making the Ida showcase so much better. Two, the Bakugo fight flows better in animated form because Bakugo's a very dynamic character. So letting him go nuts animation-wise, even if it's not like the most pristine animation the series has ever had, it makes the flow of that bit a lot better. And as you mentioned, there's some extra Shinzo and Ochako stuff during that bit, so I just think overall it's better on that front, because sure, the first two fights aren't the best or most interesting, but they're not the best or most interesting in the manga either. So it's like you have, out of the 5 events, 2 that are just the same, more or less, either way. And then you just have 3 that are just better than the manga form. So that's why I just think the anime version of that arc just does it better, all things considered.
Yeah, and then before we get into the big stuff, there's like the in between that's like in the aftermath where you have like one of the things, because we didn't really mention it, is all the stuff with Monoma, just because it's like Monoma was a character that I like for pretty much for the longest time. I really did not like, because he was insufferable on like a level even worse than Bakugo to me, just because it was like at least Bakugo I found funny, but Monoma was just like sometimes he's funny, but sometimes he's just like he's a dick just to be a dick, and it's like not even like it's the reason like his whole thing is constantly getting slapped. So it's kind of thing like in this fight, it's like you finally get to see little shades of his character. Like you get like his speech with Shinzo, how it's like, oh, my whole quirk is copying people, so it's like I'm pretty much useless unless I'm with people. So that's why I kind of put on this persona, and his hero name is the Phantom Thief. Brought it together.
It takes place in Japan, which is also in Persona 5. Oh shit!
And you get my one of my favorite moments is him. It's like because there's this. I mean, one of the biggest fan theories people had was, can Monoma copy One for All? And everyone was genuinely like, yeah, could he? And then it's like you get in the fight before the fight. Monoma's like, yeah, I don't know if I want to copy that, considering last time I saw it, he like broke all the bones in his body. But then he sees Midoriya like, oh, everything's all good. Like he can use it normally. So he copies it, and so Monoma has the full cowling effect on him, and Midoriya's like, oh fuck, Monoma, don't use it! And he's like, too late! And then it's like, oh no, it's a dud.
I think the bigger question is whether he can copy All for One.
Yeah,
At this point.
that's the next big question, because it's like, okay, can we find a way for Monoma to get close enough to one All for One?
It's one of those. It's one of those he might be able.
Can
to,
can he
only 'cause
copy
it's not-
All for One, and then can he steal All for One from All for One, and then take the original? It's like you don't. It's like reverse Unoing, but it's like, yeah.
It's like Quirk Hot Potato.
And and I do like that. That sounds that I forgot to mention in that fight is that Ochako is kind of she is basically the MVP of that fight, because she saves Midoriya. She single-handedly beats up Monoma, and then beats up the other two people, while Mina and Mineta are basically just distracting them by going crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Uraraka is probably like one of the best like hand-to-hand fighters, honestly. Because everybody else is like, dealing with like their special.
I mean, no quirks allowed hand to hand, sure.
Yeah.
But the problem is quirkless hand to hand isn't super useful in this society.
Yeah, well, I mean, as she showed, it's like it's not super useful, but it's not like completely like unused, because considering
No, it's not completely useless. It's just a way for a girl whose power isn't inherently combat focused to be able to do something. Obviously, if she can use it in conjunction with her ability, it's just a matter of her ability and combat are not compatible.
Yeah, and then the Monoma stuff leads into the whole thing, because then Aizawa has the idea of how about we have her copy Ares Rewind and see if we can use that to figure out how it works. And then he's like, oh no, I can't use, because I like it, cause in that whole scene is like he's out of the class scenario. Like Mirio has the thing like, oh, I said you were the dark side of UA, and she's like all scared of him. And Aizawa's like, oh, I wanted you two to come with her because I don't think it would be good for her mental health if she was with him alone. He's like, what do you mean? And then when he's inside, then he's like, he's actually really calm, and he's like, oh yeah, I can't do it because I can only copy powers that don't stockpile energy, because I just get the bare minimum. And it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And it's just like seeing him like be like really calm and just being like not playing any games, just being very blunt about everything. It's like, oh, that's super refreshing just to hear from Monoma.
It gives his character depth. Whoa.
And then,
How about that?
And then it has one of my favorite scenes with the moments with Midori and Eri, because Eri is like being all like, oh, wish I never had this power because all it does is hurt people. But Midoriya is like, no, your power's great. It saved me. And then he uses it's like a knife. It's like a knife can be dangerous, but you use it correctly, you can make great food out of it. And it's like this whole how he's like using it to compare to himself. It's like, oh, One for All is like very dangerous. It could hurt him, and it could also potentially be even more dangerous because Bakugo is always like, hey, that kind of sounds like All for One, don't you think? And they're always like, I don't know what that means. And then so it's like he's like, oh yeah, my power might be weird and cursed maybe, but it's like I'm gonna use it for good. And it's like I like that kind of like the connection he makes, and how he's able to like now he's able to just stand. Normally he was very like nervous when talking with other people, but now he can just simply just be very confident in how like he can reassure her and help her be like and just like cheer her up in that way.
Yeah. So I think it transitions then to Merry Christmas.
Well, no.
Yes.
First it does Bakugo and Shoto quickly getting their licenses.
Oh,
right,
gosh,
right.
that's...
That's a. We need to make sure they get their licenses so they can actually participate in things. It's not much of a scene to be perfectly honest.
I literally said, I think I don't. I literally was like, I am almost certain Horikoshi wrote this because they were like, we want to have the movie with all the kids fighting, but they don't have the licenses yet. So he quickly wrote this scene to be like, okay, now they have their licenses, right? And have it happen in winter.
It like I said, it's there to exist purely just so they can actually be involved in things. So it's fine.
All right, now let's get into the controversial part of season 5. So,
Oh my gosh.
all right, so normally in the manga, all that stuff happens, and then we jump over to the My Villain Academia arc, where the League of Villains are the main focus, and we get a story all around them. Except the anime was like, you know what? We have a movie about the kids at the Endeavor Agency. We should probably put the Endeavor Agency first so that people watching the anime knows.
It's not strictly that. It's also a matter of the Endeavor stuff is not action focused like at all. Sure, there's a fight, but it's so small time it doesn't really matter, or particularly of interest animation action wise. Meanwhile, My Villain Academia is extremely bombastic. You do not end a season on low-key family drama for a show like this. Sorry, that's just the nature of the beast for pacing and interest wise. So I understand why they did it that way.
I think it depends on how you do it, but just because I think it could have worked, but the problem was, which we'll get into. The problem is that it's how they chose to adapt it. If they actually took a bit more, if they did more creative liberties into adapting it, I think it would have turned out much better. But the fact that they pretty much
for sure
they pretty much just copy and pasted the entire Endeavor Agency arc before My Villain Academia without really any like true like actual like changing. So
like
it's
nothing was
essentially
modified to fit the
it's
new
basically
thing.
it's basically spoiling, being like, oh yeah, this is what happened, and then we're just gonna go back, and it's like, but we already kind of saw what happened.
Yeah. Then we got 5 more episodes to finish it off.
Yeah, this is easily the weakest part of the season in many regards. Now the family drama stuff's great. It's just a matter of they didn't adapt it correctly to be where it is. So I understand the decision. They just didn't do a super good job with it.
All right, so first we can go into now the second opening and ending. I really love Merry Go Round. I think that was.
I'm not a particularly big fan of the song. It's fine, and visually, it's not strictly great. If only because they use it also for My Villain Academia and don't change anything. So it's very unfitting visually for a lot of the episodes it's over.
I do agree that it's not, because I was hoping for like a really like a truly great like My Villain Academia opening, and this wasn't. It's not a great MVA opening, but I think it is a really good MHA. Like the first time I heard it, I was like, I need to listen to this again, and it's like I waited like 2 weeks for somebody to upload it to YouTube just so I could be able to listen to it, because I'm like, nobody's uploading this. I was waiting in anticipation. Like I think Peace Sign, Polaris, and Star Maker are like my top 3 favorite openings, and this is like tied with The Day. It's like this and The Day are like tied for 4th, because I'm like, I don't know which one I like more, but I really like they like it's the hard rock stuff that I always really love, and it's also a lot in English, so it's easy to sing along to.
Yeah, I was gonna say Singer has very good English.
I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think visually it's not super interesting. It's a little too focused on our 3 most popular guys and not very much anyone else. And I feel like they really should have changed the visuals to be more Villain Academia focused. So I just think it doesn't work as an opening for most of what it's over. So
I was really hoping for that My Villain Academia opening. Just
yeah.
I agree. I do agree that like the animation for the most part, there's a lot of great visual stuff. Like there's the quick fire of like the still shots. I think those stills are really cool. You have like the shot of like All Might turning around and it turns into Endeavor. I think that's a great moment. You have like the moment of Midori in like that weird space. He's looking at the stars. It's like there are like these like little like cool. There's like cool shots, but I wouldn't say
well
it's like,
directed.
there's a lot of like not a like cool dynamic animation.
yeah.
Also, I don't think this is intentional, but I kind of like the whole like the final line where it's like, and now it's our round, where you can kind of look at it as both for like the hero, the interns of being like, oh, now this is our time like to be the heroes, and then you can also see it as for the villains, now this is our time to take control. It's like I don't think this is intentional, but I feel like that one like line and that kind of like the central like theme of like the song, you kind of see as kind of accidentally fitting both sides of the heroes and villains.
A little bit, but again, without the visual accompaniment for more MVA stuff, it doesn't really work.
Yeah, like as an opening itself, it isn't perfect, but I like the song.
It kind of feels like it's just like stuck between being 2 arcs instead of just one.
And the ending, the ending song. It's like it was kind of forgettable, but I thought the visuals of just the fact that they decided to like show a little bit more hints into Hawks' past. I thought that was an interesting decision for them to do for that.
It was cute.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, the more dynamic shots with Hawks are good, but some of the stills with the main trio are just kind of
Yeah,
they're fine.
Yeah, the first I like the first ending more overall.
Yeah, I think, but technically before we went to the Todoroki family drama, we did have. I just want to go over Merry Christmas.
Yeah, that's right. We gotta do Christmas first.
Yes.
Just
mostly just because Eri gets a Buster Sword.
Yes.
And she better have it at the end of the series somewhere.
in the novel there's like a whole thing of like that there's a whole chapter that takes place right after this thing of like her walking, she's walking like back to her room with the giant sword, and Aizawa was like, where are you gonna put it's like she's talking to herself being like, where am I gonna put this, like do I put it above, like right beside my bed, no, do I put it on and she also is like, oh, like Mirio's gonna be freaked when he sees this.
I like how she continues her motion copycat routine, which is even into the manga today.
And when she comes in, she's like, trick or treat. Wrong all. I got
Oh,
Easter
she's so
eggs.
cute.
Yeah. That whole it's always just every time like they have like just the 1A just kind of get together, just have a little thing. It's like it's always great.
Love that slice of life content. Can't get enough of it.
Yep.
And then they have the woman who sang Jiro, who was Jiro's singing voice, did another song during that Christmas thing, and it was really cute too.
Oh yeah.
And then I think we had the filler episode to tie into the movie.
First we talk just kind of like, so the premise, because this is like, again, this is a post the My Villain Academia arc, where the whole idea is that something big happened, so the Public Safety Commission's like, we gotta issue immediate work studies for all of the hero students, and all the teachers is like, this is fishy, and they're like, yeah, anyway. And then so everybody's now going to work studies, and Midoriya's like, well, Night Eye's agency is busy, so I can't go, and Best Genius is missing. So it's like, oh, he can't go anywhere. So Todoroki's like, well, how about you come with me? And so they're like, ooh, go in internship with the #1 hero. That's pretty cool. And then you get Endeavor kind of being a dick, but like actually, but in a funny way, when he first sees them, and he's like, greetings. Did you really think it was going to be like that?
They get a lot of good Endeavor stuff out of this part of the story.
Well, the best part is that you realize that due to their conversations, Midori has more in common personality-wise with Endeavor than he does All Might.
Yeah, honestly, I kind of love that the Endeavor Midoriya relationship is kind of like one of my like unintentional favorite aspects, just because I love like when that first scene, and you kind of see like you have that scene where Endeavor's like, he remembers the dialogue that he had back during the sports festival, and he's like, those words still stuck with him. And then later when he's like explaining his powers, he's like, huh, yeah, you have a power that you have like the super great power that like also like destroys your body, like just like me.
Well, it's not even that. It's just Midoriya does this whole overly long explanation mumbling thing, and Todoroki and Shoto and Bakugo are just like, ugh, this shit again. And it's like, and then Endeavor just gets it immediately.
Yeah, and then
it's
he
like,
understands.
you got that?
Yeah, because it's also a thing of like it's like, oh yeah, Endeavor's actually really smart. So it's like, oh, he hears it and he's like,
it's not so much that they're both smart. It's more that they process information the same way, which is really interesting because it again shows that All Might's a terrible teacher.
But yeah, he is. that was the whole thing.
It's one of those. As much as All Might gave him the power, Midoriya probably would have progressed a lot faster if he just trained under Endeavor from the start.
Well, I mean, it's also the clear of like Endeavor would have never trained him before. It's the thing of like, obviously,
it's just a matter of if they were like friends with each other, sort of thing, and not. Endeavor had a burning hatred for the guy.
Well, we'll get into that once we get into like the actual drama, but like that is kind of the big thing with Endeavor, is that he's very much like unlike the like he puts so much effort into like the smarts and like the detective work and kind of like figuring stuff out. So you kind of have this thing of like, oh yeah, he is definitely like smarter than All Might, but it's like. Just the fact that he couldn't.
Number two.
I mean, the whole Superman Batman parallels are very obvious at this point.
Yeah, so like, you have that whole thing where he just doesn't want he just initially doesn't want them. He's just like, I'll take you on just because Shoto said so, and he's just they're following him. They fight weird conspiracy guy, and then
who's that crazy character?
And then Hawks gives him the book, which this is the big thing that I think kind of slightly ruins the decision to switch the arcs, because like, so you have like the Hawks gives Endeavor the book, and Endeavor's like, huh, Hawks is actually kind of fishy, let me investigate this, and he reads the book and he's able to be like, oh, his highlighted things Dakota message, and then that's intercut with the scenes of Hawks at the Liberation Army, where you see the Liberation Army and then also the League just sitting there, and they're like talking about like, oh, something's gonna happen with Tomura, and it's this thing of like, oh yeah, they pretty much just spoiled that, oh, like the League and the Liberation Army are working together, even though we then see them.
Yeah, it's one of those.
It was a little bit too faithful.
It's a little too weird. It's also one of those things where you're not going to kill off Shigaraki and his crew doing something else. So it is a spoiler, but it's also one of those. If they did it correctly, as someone who was reading the manga at the time, it's also one of those. You're not going to kill off your main antagonist doing something that isn't against the heroes like that.
The spoiler isn't that Shigaraki and the League die. The spoiler is that they working with the Liberation Army.
I know that. The point that's not the point I'm making. It's more, it's a spoiler where we know that they join. The Liberation Army teams up with them and stuff. It's like, it's like, yeah, but you're not going into the My Villain Academia expecting Tomura and his crew to lose either.
Yeah, but there's some kind of like tension involved with knowing.
No. I get that. It's just one of those. Oh, it's such a complete spoiler. It's like, is it?
I remember because when I first read that arc, my biggest worry was like, oh God, is he gonna kill them all? Because like that's what I was, because it was less about Shigaraki dying. I was like worried that they were gonna die because I was like, oh, these are all such cool characters. I don't want them to be wasted. So the spoiler that they don't die and they team up was like, oh, that's actually like a surprise.
Sure,
so I think if they cut out all of those scenes of like Hawks at the Liberation Army, and instead it was just, oh, he gave him the book, Endeavor reads the book, and he reads something, but we don't know what it is, and then he's like, now I'm gonna. If
they cut it back in at the end,
if they kept it completely vague and if just like, oh, something happened, and we as viewers have no idea what happened, but it's apparently really big, and then we jump backwards, and then we see everything with the League, and it's like, oh. It makes sense and it's a surprise. Like I think that would have been like the perfect way to do it.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like you have that Endeavor, that then Endeavor decides to do his whole thing of like, okay, I know shit's bad now, I'll go and help you. He has the thing of like when he listens to Midoriya and Bakugo and he hears Midoriya's thing and he's like, oh, you also hurt yourself, so you're just like us. And Midoriya just kind of has this thing of like, you mean us? But it's like, it's just that whole, like, the connection, that Endeavor kind of has a better familiar connection with Midoriya than he honestly does with Shoto, which I find to be hilarious.
It's, when you brought up, like, that us moment, it just reminded me of that one scene from when Uncle Phil is just laughing, saying, we. We?
Yeah, and then so you got the agency, like the agency starts, and then in the middle, because the whole thing takes place about a week, so you kind of like jump into the middle of it. So they throw in like a filler movie tie-in thing, which honestly, like I like, this is the kind of movie, like filler tie-in stuff that I wish we got more of, because it's just, oh, you're like, it is literally, it's a sequel to the Suyu internship episode,
yeah, that was
where
kind of interesting.
Where you have like, it was like Sirius and Selkie, where she's interacting with them, and it's like, oh, it's her, Ochako, and Nejire and Ryukyu, and it's kind of like it's an unintentional redemption for those, because it's kind of been like a joke in the manga community of like, oh, the Ryukyu team basically gets nothing to do and they're always kind of shafted. So the fact that they do get kind of like a whole episode just to themselves of doing stuff is like, oh, it's just nice to see them like get the chance.
And an episode of where like a quarter of it is just them prancing about in swimsuits.
Have that beach episode.
I also like how they're able to connect, because it's a tie into World Heroes Mission, out in theaters worldwide next month.
Oh shit!
Actually, no, it's this month. Oh god.
Oh man! Happy Halloween.
But yeah, so you have that. So it starts with the whole thing of like, oh, these guys, they're using the quirk-enhancing drug Trigger, which, as a Vigilantes fan, I was really happy, because this is the first time that drug has been referred to as Trigger outside of Vigilantes. So just hearing that, I'd be like, oh, it's a nice connection.
Getting closer to that crossover.
Yeah, and then you get like the ending where it's like, oh, the main villain. You get a little tease of the main villain Fleckturn being like, oh, they're doing some scheming. And in the English dub, he's voiced by Robbie Damon, and that's really cool.
Yes.
Yeah, he has really The English trailer came out like a few days ago, and like that's like filled with his like monologuing, and he's doing a really good job with that. So I'm really excited to see him in the full movie.
Same
It's
here.
kind of funny that the Hero Academia dubs keep voicing popular kind of voice actor pretty boy guys, like because the last one was Johnny Young Bosch, and now they have Robbie Damon.
And Keith Silverstein was the villain in Two Heroes.
Yes,
Che-
Vector.
Cheeto and Akechi were both MHA movie villains, and then Johnny Young Bosch, and then just throw in fake Broly.
Fucking Unarkami.
Yeah, so easy. You got the movie to assess, and now we can go into the juicy stuff. We can talk about domestic abuse.
Oh,
Oh
boy. Fun topics.
I mean, I mean, earlier in the. Was it last? No, it wasn't last season because last season we ended on the big fight with Endeavor. But this is also the point we get the whole nice Scar line. It's like shade, so much shade. There's so much shade here. Even Todoroki's like, this is dark, dude. And not Todoroki,
Tokoyami.
Tokoyami. Sorry, brain fart.
I do because in the manga it's really hard because it's like because the way it's shaded, it's like, oh yeah, you can see the scar, but it's like, okay, it's a scar, but it doesn't look that bad. Like Shoto's is more like darkened than his, but then in the anime it's like, oh god, that is a scar. It's like
Yeah.
the anime does a great job of being like, oh yeah, that is like a big red scar. And I'm glad that is. And then it's like, yeah, because it is probably the most, yeah, because we mentioned it a little bit just because of like with the Endeavors, the Pro Hero stuff last season, but it's probably one of the most interesting things My Hero has ever decided to do, which is like, we're going to take the abusive father figure and kind of make him the secondary protagonist of our series.
Yeah, it's a very interesting way to go about it.
In a sense, yeah. Well, the nice part is it doesn't just do a heel face. Suddenly he's good and everything's fine. It's like, no, there is years of shit to unpack here, and it's not gonna happen quickly.
He has to work for it.
Yeah, that was always the biggest worry. Like every time, like when that Pro Hero stuff like happened, and I was like,
I mean, that's the problem. That's the problem with all terrible parents in anime, where they just magically are either good or they're like so mustache twirlingly evil. It's kind of pointless.
yeah, no, exactly. It was like my whole worry because in all pretty much most like series, it's either the parent is completely irredeemable or they do well. Not even just parent, just any like abusive figure like that. They're either completely irredeemable or they do a sudden heel turn and now they're good and everything is forgiven. And it's just like I don't want like it's like if you're gonna do that because I was so worried that we were gonna get like yeah like you're expecting the whole thing of like oh Endeavor beats the big thing and it's like everybody's like we forgive you everything's happy now but then he comes home and
Yeah.
Fumi's like being like oh she's trying it's like let's welcome in Natsuo's like I don't want anything to do with you you piece of shit and then Shoto's like the one in the middle of being like oh Endeavor the hero is pretty great but I'm not really into you right now as a father so.
It's a very, very smart, mature way to go about it.
It gives it's a lot. The big thing it's kind of like that it kind of delves into is just the whole idea of like, what do you do? What do you do to atone in this kind of situation? That
Well,
you
it did the only smart thing it could do, and the only mature response any of them could have had in the situation. Endeavor removed himself from the situation.
yeah, and that's the whole thing that he's kind of like learning because his whole thing is like that he is like from the start of the series. It's like yeah, he's just the absolute biggest like dickhead with only one goal in mind, just getting to number one, making sure Shota gets to number one. And then he does get to number one, and now he's like, "Well, fuck, what do I do now?" And then he kind of like has the
It's not even that. He's still pissed because he didn't earn number one. He was given number one because he didn't want to be number one. He wanted to beat All Might.
yeah, and you know because the whole thing is yeah, he was given that, and now he was like everything I did was for nothing because like because he recognized like even like at his worst he recognized what he was doing was wrong, but it was like as long as it accomplishes my goals, then it would have been worth it. But the fact that it didn't, then it's like every terrible thing I did was like for nothing. So now he's like, what do I do? And so he decides like when he becomes like when he like is on the stage of number one, his kind of whole goal is to be like, oh, I want to be a hero that my son like can look up to. And there's this whole thing of like, oh, he wants his son to look up to him, but it's also like his son's only looking up to him as a hero, but not as a father. So it's like this thing of being like, yeah, how do I like connect to him as a father? And you have that scene at the dinner table when after the dinner table when Midoriya's talking to him and being like, oh, like I can tell that it's like I can tell that you are like waiting for the moment to forgive him, and it's like I think he's like I whatever any decision that you make, is correct. Like whatever, like you're thinking that there's a right and a wrong. There is like whatever you decide is correct, and it's just and then it's Endeavor hearing that, and he's like, oh, it's like now like it's funny just hearing it's funny hearing like Midoriya is always like the Todoroki therapist of just like he's saying very simple things, but it's like it's the right words that they need to hear. It's like with Shoto during the sports festival, and now it's Endeavor hearing Midoriya's words of like, oh, I just need to let them like I can't force myself to let them make a decision. I just need to have them make the decision whenever they're ready.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it just anime wise, this was just very poorly paced compared to the manga version.
I do think there's a lot they added a lot in the they added a lot of scenes in the anime that I think like heightened.
But then you also have the episode that only translated one chapter into the anime was half flashback.
Yeah, I would say for that episode, it's kind of a thing of like that first half. I can kind of understand that episode just because the whole idea is that we're like this is yeah, it was the dinner episode. It's like we're doing this very heavy topic and like we're like we want to remind being like, okay, this is everything that's been going on with Endeavor. And it's like we're gonna be dealing with a heavy topic here, so we want to kind of show everything that's been going. Like they don't try to sugarcoat it. They flash back to here's all the terrible, like they literally like this was never in the manga. They literally add a scene of him slapping Ray. So it's like yeah, they're being serious about like they want to like highlight, be like, okay, this is what we're dealing with and what we're gonna be talking about for the next half of the episode. And then like the following episode has like a scene of him. Oh, there's also like extra scenes of like the boy, like them all like doing the like just like a regular day in the life of the HCF, like going around like solving troubles. Like I think like just like those couple moments I think was like really good because we only really get like those like two like there's like the first one where they fight Star Servant and then like the one other quick moment. So like just having those like little like flashes of being like, oh, this is what they kind of do. So it gives you an idea of what they've been doing all week. And I was glad for that. And I like the extended ending scene where they showed Endeavor arresting Takami, which is like no spoilers, but that actually ends up being very important going forward. And then so you actually see because in the manga ending just mentions, oh, I saw you arrest a guy named Takami, and I was like obsessed. You actually see that happen in the anime. It's like, oh, like little scenes like that I think is like that like to me like really elevate the anime. Like if you're not gonna be like super overboard with the animation, I think adding scenes that like add extra context to the manga I think is what the anime should be focusing on doing.
Other than that, yeah, pretty good arc.
A good arc that was better done in the manga than it was in the anime, I feel, overall speaking, just due to pacing issues.
And then something I wasn't expecting the anime to do is because I just didn't realize how much further they were gonna go. So they're just like, you know what, fuck it, let's also throw this in, and then they throw in the Shirakumo stuff, and it's like, okay,
this is something that's primarily from Vigilantes, which I feel is not necessary for the anime. Because it does some stuff for Aizawa and Present Mike, but it's like this has no bearing on the overall plot. So I really wish we would have just skipped it.
No, it is super important to the plot considering it's like, oh, learning that Kurogiri is a Nomu who's like their old friend and who they give them the important information that they need.
There are plenty of other ways they could have gotten that information, though, is the thing. I feel it's there to add drama, just to kind of be drama, which, again, is fine in context of Vigilantes.
This is a problem in both manga and anime, just because it's like, the whole... Shirakumo is mentioned, like, once at the end of the joint training arc, where Mike kind of gives a vague illusion of, like, oh, you're the way you're training Shinzo, so you remind you of Shirakumo, and I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? I was like, I don't know. And then now it's like, oh... And then she's mentioned once, and then it's like, oh, Kurogiri is your old friend Shirakumo. Ooh.
Does that matter? No, not really.
But if you read Vigilantes, which at the time I had not read Vigilantes yet, you get like a few months before this chapter, there was like a whole like arc of like, oh, showing Aizawa's high school life where he was friends with Mike and Shirako. So it's like that. That's pretty much the only like way to like you would know about it, the character and like how did he feel.
Yeah, it's like I get it. They get the whole hospital info from him, but it's like you could have very easily written a different way to get that. So it's like this is woefully unnecessary. It's there to give, I guess, Aizawa and President make some sort of character stuff going into the next big, war arc, and it's like this. It feels like a bit of an unnecessary misstep that wasn't really needed.
I think both Aizawa's Japanese and English. I think their whole performance during that scene was excellent though. Like I love just
Yes,
them breaking
absolutely.
down.
And so, shall we move on to the big important arc?
My Villain Academia.
Yeah. To address one of the major criticisms that it's one of those criticisms that I generally speaking agree with, but I understand why they did it. There is a decent amount of cut content for Reed Destro and his group in terms of the anime. It's one of those, I get it, but at the same time, as someone who's read the manga up to its current point at the time of this recording, they don't matter a whole lot after this point. So I understand why they made those cuts to focus more so on our group that we're following than anything. But
I feel like the problem is that the My Villain Academia arc is only 5 episodes long, and it did not need to be 5 episodes.
no,
long.
it needed to be 6 to 7. You could have cut if you cut the first joint training battles into one episode and then pace the Todoroki stuff better, so you don't have half an episode of flashback. Yeah, definitely. It's just one of those. Even if you made it 6 or 7 episodes, you still would have had to cut a decent amount, and the cut stuff they cut was the stuff that should have been cut, generally speaking.
No, I honestly, I think if they did add in those 2 episodes, they could have added all those cut scenes like with no problem.
They wouldn't have gotten all of them. They would have gotten more, but you wouldn't have gotten all of them.
Well, because I mean, the biggest things that the thing is that they cut pretty much they pretty much cut every single thing that characterized Reed Destro. It's like
Yeah, no, you could have done more with Reed Destro, but the problem is you still needed to do Journalist Girl, who has way more in the manga.
No,
but you
no, no.
needed to cut that.
Curious as much she does. Like the
No,
biggest,
she has more in the manga, but the problem is you do her in you have no place for that in anime pacing.
no because I was rereading the manga as the anime was coming out because I was like I want to see how much is exact, and I know this is what this is what they got rid of. So pretty much the whole opening with Reed Destro was cut because there's a whole like commercial talking about Detnerad and being like, oh, Detnerad is this big like corporation that sells support items to heroes, and now they're branching out to people. And it's like this, like you see Reed Destro at this very like happy-go-lucky, like kind of like Walt Disney-esque like personality, and then like inside he's chatting with his assistant. He's like, "Oh, have you heard the Metal Liberation War? It's pretty great, huh?" And the guy's like, "Yeah, I've read it. It's like the guy's kind of a wacko, huh?" And Reed Destro's like, "Oh yeah, I see that. Hey, come over here." Snaps his neck. But he also snaps his neck
gosh.
while like crying because it's like it like that whole scene kind of like this like how many faces Reed Destro. He has like his front face. He kind of has his like his quote unquote private face. He has kind of his internal feelings of being like, I don't want to kill you, but you said a bad thing about Destro, so I got to kill you. And then his true face of his persona in front of the Metal Liberation Army. So it's like in just that one chapter, it kind of characterizes Reed Destro in such a very interesting way. And it's also the fact that he's like Joker crossed with Norman Osborn, so that's kind of cool.
I don't
looks
get
like
Joker.
Doofenshmirtz.
No,
I don't get Joker vibes from him, but yes, he is very much anime Doofenshmirtz.
see, the very first time I saw him, all I could think of was kind of Mark Hamill Joker.
No,
Really?
not really. I don't get that at all. He's not Joker in the slightest. I mean, maybe the long nose, but that's about
Like
it.
the nose, and like he dressed in like he had like that little like purple top hat and the coat, and I was like, oh, I remember.
I can see like how like skinny he is, but like
No, he's not really skinny. He just wears a suit. So,
And in the English dub, he's voiced by Sonny Strait, which is pretty cool.
yep.
you see that's a weird one. I thought.
Should have gotten Reed Dustro to do it.
Yeah, and the thing is, I didn't see Reed Destro's Doofenshmirtz until like him appearing in that final episode, and it's like,
That's when the meme started making the rounds, but it had been noticed a little bit before. But it's like a face-palming civilian, a face-palming villain, puts on more hands. The League of Villains, Shiggy.
yeah. So you have that. Yeah. So that was what cut. Yeah. That pretty much all of that like opening Redestro stuff. Then the first, like pretty much the whole beginning of MVA, which is the League of Villains assaulting the Quark KKK and like fighting, because I feel like again you could kind of argue that it's like not important, but I do think it's honestly like more important than you would initially think, because it's like, oh yeah, the fact that you learn that, oh, like the Quark the Quark KKK actually exists, and it's like, oh, there are racists. Yeah, so you remember that, oh, there are racists in this world. So
it's only relevant to Spinner, and the problem with Spinner is that he's functionally the least useful member of the group. So while it gives him some good characterization, since he's not a particularly active combatant, you need to focus on the people actively doing things.
I don't even think it's just for Spinner's sake, but it's just kind of like it's supposed to be the kind of juxtaposition of the League of Villains, who we've kind of seen as like the biggest bads, and now they're killing like racists. So it's like, oh, it's like they're kind of inadvertently doing something good. So it's like it acts as like kind of it acts as kind of like the perfect. It is the perfect kind of like juxtaposition of like being like, oh, now that the League of Villains are the main characters of this, is like you kind of see them in being like, I mean, like they're still obviously like the terrible people, but it's like having them.
I was gonna say that doesn't increase their standing.
Yeah, no, obviously
bad guys fighting.
Yeah, it's just the whole thing of like, oh, you see them you can kind of cheer cheer them on killing these people, because like, oh yeah,
even the bad guys aren't racist.
Well, I mean, there was the thing where overhaul misgenders Magne, and they're like, she's a she, you fool. So it's like even we don't misgender. But it's like, yeah, so you have that, and the whole scene is supposed to be like, it's kind of establishing that, oh, the League of Villains are like in the dumps, and it's like, oh, after the events of Overhaul.
They could have done a little bit more with that just to show how down and out they were, comparative speaking, after All for One got locked up.
Especially because you have like Spinner and everybody else kind of like they're second guessing Shigaraki's kind of leadership, which is like, I mean, like the whole thing is about like Shigaraki becoming like more and more of a leader. So it's like this started with them kind of being like, oh, like, well, do you even have a plan? Like, what are we doing? And it's like Shigaraki's like, he just doesn't know. And then Gigantomachia appears, and that's when you have the whole. Then that's when the anime actually starts, where you got like Gigantomachia being like, no, you're worthless. I don't want you. And then Dr. Eggman appears out of nowhere to save them.
Yeah, when he does the scene where the doctor turns around, you just see like his goggled glasses like do the evil anime eyeglass shimmer thing. It's like just play EGGMAN over that.
Should have gotten Mike Pollock to voice him. SMH.
I mean, you could have. He only appears in like 2 scenes before this arc.
Because I didn't really care for the like because especially reading like the way he's written in the like his Ray's written in the manga, like he has those like those ho ho holes, and he has a much more kind of like electric kind of personality, where in this one he's just kind of like generic mad doctor. And I'm like, oh, in both Japanese and English, like I wish they gave him a much more like hyperactive vocal performance.
Yeah.
You have the whole thing, and it's the scene that kind of like sets up, like, because it sets up that like Dobby's kind of like the aloof guy of like he's with the League of Villains, but he's like, I don't really want to do anything. And then the doctor's like, oh, let me help me with my Nomu stuff. He's like, I don't want to, but fine.
My character arc's coming later.
And then you got because then it's like then it leads into the whole the actual like the Meta Liberation Army stuff, where it's like, oh, we
kidnapped all of your boyfriend.
We kidnapped your dealer, and we found out where you were. So either stay there and get attacked by the heroes, or come to our thing and die. Because the MLA's whole thing is they're like, oh, we want a society. We want to create a society where
they're libertarians.
They're libertarians. We want to create a society where everybody can use their quirks wherever they want, and the League is like they're
you can use your quirk however you want. Consequences be damned, which is a really fucking terrible idea.
Yeah, I mean they are like the stupid elite. So it's like it makes sense as
Hmm.
like a good like it's why like when they first came about and it's like oh these guys are they're such like a cool like idea for like a villain group and just like the like be like oh yeah the people like this would exist in this world and it's like the fact that it's like this underground kind
Mhm.
of like cult
Oh no, they're
following.
they're a very real and understandable part of the world. It's just one of those your idea is stupid on a practical level.
They also have the gorillas on their team.
Yeah, one of the ice climbers.
that's a bit weird. Yeah, they have the gorillas and they have Popo from the Ice Climbers.
Ske-
But where's Ace from Powerpuff Girls?
and Skeptic's voiced by Ben Diskin, which is even better. He's the perfect
Yeah.
voice.
Oh
Yeah,
snap!
that was. I remember when I first heard that, I'm like, yes, that's perfect. Because I was worried because I was like, the main one for all you like the first one for all users. I'm like, he has an okay English voice. Banjo, I didn't really care for his English voice, and then it was like, oh, when I heard Skeptic, I'm like, yeah, Skeptic was perfect. I was glad about.
You see, Banjo's a weird one where it's like he could definitely be voiced by Chris Sabat, but Chris Sabat already voices like a
This is
major
all like,
character.
yeah,
Chris Sabat plays like five people in Dragon Ball. They could do it again.
yeah.
The league.
Yeah,
Oh wait, the league also had like Shigaraki kind of has like a very because the whole thing is that they have to fight Gigantomachia to get him to submit to him, and he has this idea of like, oh, how about I go? How about how about we go over there? We'll basically stall for time. Machia will show up. We'll let them all fight and kill each other, and then I'll come in and steal the kill. It's like it's a fun like Shigaraki idea, and it's like it's
It's a fun idea. I think they overestimated it a little bit, but is what it is.
yeah.
So we get to the main trio of our group getting their big villain moments.
I was there is kind of like the one thing of like it is the thing where I was kind of disappointed in the fact that the animation quality of the all of the Deka City battles is kind of underwhelming. Just the direction and just like it was very
The later Shiggy stuff is really good, but mostly
Hmm.
the most of it is very
the
standard.
final Shiggy moment
Yeah.
is excellent, but there's like so many of the times the characters are so off model, and it's just kind of distract. It's like it was just kind of bothering because I'm like, it didn't need to be this. Like it's kind of like my big like that. Like there are like the character moments they do really well, but it's just a lot of the action of this stuff was just really especially because we were like I think that's also one of the reasons why so many people were disappointed because they were like, oh man, we're gonna get a lot of really cool bombastic like action in this, and it just kind of felt like it felt like they were just kind of blasting through and trying to run.
Yeah, it's doing the movie and this season definitely. It took its toll.
It's a very
Yeah,
it's
very
a very
much so.
it's a controversial. It's kind of been this like we have no idea how truthful this is, but it's kind of been this thing of like oh the Japanese fandom doesn't care for the villains and loves the heroes, so it's kind of this thing of like oh they just kind of quickly went through the My Villain Academia arc just because they're like oh nobody really likes this arc, so we're just gonna go even though like pretty much everywhere else in the world like thinks it's like the best arc. It's unclear exactly how true that is because it's like oh there's like things of like oh like there's like data sheets of being like oh the My Villain Academia arc is one of like the lowest selling arcs of like the past like 10 volumes or whatever, or it's like oh
Yeah,
here's thing that's like there's like data and stuff like that, but it's like it's hard to say how on like true that is because I know when the
yeah.
season was coming out like Japanese audience was like even they were like oh yeah why are you butchering this arc, so it's like yeah it's a very weird thing of just kind of like
It definitely feels like it comes across as like poor planning instead of something that was intentional.
Yeah, so hopefully they get it fixed.
MVA is the one arc that I'm like, I feel like you could watch the entire anime without ever watching the manga. I do think you need to read the MVA manga. Like, if you watch the anime, then you have to go and read that in the manga, just because I feel like it does.
Yes,
Oh, it is
it's
just so much like better paced. That has all the like. It's the only arc in the.
The
Agreed.
art is fantastic.
I don't think it's a terrible anime version. It's just not as good as the manga in most regards. Like
Yeah,
it does the job, but
it's good.
that's all
Just
it
not
does.
doesn't really surpass the manga in that regard.
Yeah.
It's because the anime, like, other than like there'll be like, oh, this one dialogue was cut or this one panel was cut, but this is the only art.
Well,
This
people were getting fussy over the wrong shit. Is my problem with is my problem with like the fandom during this time? It's like you're getting mad at the wrong fucking things, you fucking kids.
I think it's because well, it's because this is the only arc in the entirety of MHA where they actually cut scenes. Every other time like there's been cut content in MHA, it's been like, oh, they removed a panel or they removed a line of dialogue, but that's it. Like it's nothing to
Yeah.
like cry about, but this is the first time where it's like, yeah, full scenes, full things that kind of like that like characterized characters more were kind of removed just for the
Mhm.
sake of time, which is why I'm like, okay, yeah, I do think this needs to be read in a manga after being watched in order to get the full experience. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's like you have the big thing, which is like our main three lead characters that get their big spotlight but they get their character backstories. Like you first get Toga, where it's like where it's honestly Toga's backstory is kind of her backstory and her fight with Curious is kind of one of the more darker moments in MHA that never gets talked
Well,
about.
it's dark, but it's interesting because it still points Toga as just an inherently messed up person,
Mhm.
which is an interesting idea because they talk into how quirks develop from personalities and vice versa, and it goes into the fact that even like they could have gotten her to counseling earlier and things like that. It's like no, I think Himeko would have been messed up regardless, just by nature of her power and personality not functioning in any sort of civilized society. How do you handle someone who just kind of by nature screwed up?
The real enemy is society.
Except not
Yeah,
really.
well, because the whole idea.
Well, no, like Toga would absolutely be dancing down the stairs in a red suit and all that. But
Well, she does get like the first thing she wants like every time is getting a new coat. So her whole thing is like the fact that her that she at a young age she's like attracted to blood and she's like sucking out of a dead bird and all her parents
yeah,
can do is just being like, why can't you be normal? And it's like instead of like trying.
it's like no, her parents certainly didn't help. It's just a matter of how do you help someone like that? Because her instinct
Mhm.
is to kill things and to kill the things she likes more than anything else. So it's like, how do you help someone like that? The answer is you probably not can't. You probably just can't in many regards. So
And there's the whole thing where it's like, oh yeah, so be her whole is things like, oh, she wants to be normal, so she ends up she puts on the metaphorical mask as she like tries to fit in with people, but it's like, oh, it just keeps breaking and breaking and breaking out of her until he gets to that moment where it's like, I think it's the end of her end of middle school where she ends up she just can't take it anymore and then starts sucking the blood out of one of her classmates, which leads to her. Now it's like, oh, now she's full on crazy. So it's like, yeah, it's
yeah,
like the
so
idea of
Mhm.
like, yeah, so it's like the idea of like
it's one of those they might have been able to help her, but it's also like she's just so messed up from the get go.
I think it's the fact that just she didn't really get, again, like the way the story is told is that she didn't get any help. All it was just her parents being like, "Don't do that." So
Yeah,
she's like, "Okay, I
not
won't do that."
it's one of those. I'm not 100% blaming her. It's just a matter of how do you help someone who's kind of very much predisposed to like the worst possible behavior, just based on the whole quirk personality theory the series has going on.
I think the darkest part of that is just the fact that Curious is like she's doing this whole thing of like, oh, she wants to interview her and like learn more about her past, like why she acts that way, and the whole thing is being like, oh yeah, like I understand. It's like your whole problem is that, oh, your quirk is like making you do this. It isn't your fault, and instead of trying to help her whole thing is we're gonna kill you and make your story a martyr to help our cause, and it's like, holy shit.
Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's kind of the big thing of like being like, oh, even when one person does understand her, it's like, oh, they don't care, like that you only exist to help your life only exists to die to help others, and then that leads to her kind of like having her awakening where she suddenly is like, oh god, I can use, like, transforms into a Chaco, and she's like, I can use Ochako's quirk, and then shows just how deadly Ochako's quirk can be when it's like, oh, murder.
Yeah, and this is where aspects of the fandom whining really just started to get to me. It's like, oh, they censored it. It's like, no, you got every piece of information you needed to know. You just didn't see the one panel of them heading face first to the ground.
And there was blood. It was like there was bloodless. Like there was
It's
still
like you.
blood
It's like
there.
you. Yeah, it's like there's so plenty
Yeah.
of bloody. You heard all the crunching. It's like you just didn't get one panel. It's like stop whining. It's like they were talking. They were complaining about like one bit where Shigaraki's on like the doctor's table and there's like all the tubes and stuff in him, and it's like, oh, they censored that. It's like, shut up.
They replaced the
Shut
blood.
the
They
hell-
replaced the blood with
It's like-
electricity. Who cares?
Yeah, it's
They
like
removed
shut-
her vagina bones. Gosh darn it!
It's like, shut the hell up. This dates back to frickin' Dragon Ball. It airs on a kid's time slot in Japan. What do you expect them to frickin' do about it? It's like even the most generally speaking tame shonen battle stuff still has stuff that did that back in the day. What did you think was going to happen when you have like actual pics of like Shigaraki's insides sticking out at parts of it? It's like do you want to? It's like you guys want to go back to the days where you didn't get any of that at all. It's like you know, just speaking as like the old man of the group. It's like you kids don't get to fucking complain about this shit. It's like you want to go back to whole multiple years of filler crap. It's like you want to get back to, you know, oh, you can't show any violence. You just have an energy beam and they're just totally fine. They just have some scuffs on them. It's like, I'm sorry, what are you guys complaining about at this point?
It's a good thing those buildings were empty.
Yeah, it's like so box rant over, but it's just like, I'm sorry, I just got so sick of kids whining about the most inane shit about this season.
I would say if they completely removed all the blood from this arc, then it'd be like, okay, that would understand. But like, no, there's still blood. There's still
every
blood all over the
gory
place.
thing is still there. It just went from a 10 gory to like an 8.5. So you're still getting all the context for everything.
Yeah, so you get that. You get Dobby fighting Getten because it's like, oh, we're not ready for Dobby's story yet, so we're just gonna have him fight this random ice dude.
We're just gonna have them on a standoff forever. Yeah.
we're gonna have more foreshadowing for something that everybody knows already.
Yeah.
Be like, okay.
Where it's kept secret of the series.
Yep, see,
Who's this crazy character?
Then we get to the probably one of the better overall character moments of the entire season is
Twice.
Twice is amazing.
Sad Man's Parade.
my favorite. Yeah, Twice is legitimately my favorite character in MHA. I love him.
Same here. I love him.
Go me, yeah, go me. You can do it, me. Let's go, me.
Yeah. Twice's whole. I mean, I just love the fact that Twice is basically a hero in the context of MVA, since the whole thing is that he's storming a villain's base in order to rescue somebody. Like Giran is basically Eri, and Twice is Deku in this. He even like goes full.
I mean,
100%.
you go about. You were talking about like Joker parallels earlier. It's like, no, Twice is Joker, comparatively speaking.
The chapter of his backstory is literally called "All It Takes Is One Bad Day." It's a literal Killing Joke reference.
It's like he's literally just the Joker of the group. He's insane, but it's not his fault. Well, I mean, in context of the series, it is technically speaking his fault, but only
Twice
very loosely.
Twice is like the most interesting kind of like thing of like, yeah, because it's though we see in the backstory where he's just a down on the luck slummy guy who basically
he's the only one who's genuinely a good person deep down, and circumstances what pushed him to do this rather than, I mean, I guess to an extent Spinner, but Spinner is functionally also not a nice guy in many regards.
Well, I mean, Twice. I mean, yeah, they're both kind of like in the because Twice's whole thing is that he just wants companionship, and he's like he wants people to care.
I separate the two because Spinner actively makes the choice to do bad things, whereas Twice is just kind of going along with whatever his messed up head says is fine. Where in context, it's like if he was more sane, he wouldn't go along with it.
Oh, I feel like, well, I don't even think it's like the insanity. It's more so just like Twice. He just desperately wants like companionship, and it's like, oh,
well, no, that's the point. If he were sane, that's the thing. If he was more sane, he would be able to get the help he needs and find it in other places. But because he's insane, he's with this group of villains.
Yeah, it was like because he finds this group of people that accept him for who he is, and he's like, oh, I can be myself. I can be like these guys like.
The question then becomes: is he really even himself at that point? Which is the interesting kind of talk between parallel between him finding he's his real original self versus you're still not yourself.
Yeah,
Twice.
well, yeah, because I mean, like, he's even at the end, like, because the whole thing is like, oh, once he quote unquote gets over his trauma, and at the end he's still kind of acting crazy. So it's like, oh, it's like
you're not fixed Twice. You're not going to be fixed.
Either he's not fixed, or that that was always just him. He's just a naturally crazy guy because that's who he. It's kind
Except
of like,
based on his backstory, I don't think he was.
it's basically it's like the best versions of Deadpool, where it's like when they go into like his actual like when they actually go into like, oh, his insanity is just kind of like a front for hiding his like his most insecure kind of like troubles. It's like Twice is pretty much like, yeah, like the best, like it is the anytime that they like, especially like specifically the Gary Duggan Deadpool stuff, which is like when they actually try to like make him like a fully like depth character. It's like, yeah, that's basically what Twice is, along with just being really funny. And then yeah, you get that great moment, and then you get the great moment of infinite sad man, infinite doubles, sad man's parade, and it's just the onslaught of Twice's.
Oh no, me! Watch out, me! It also highlights that he's probably, besides super powered up Shigaraki, the most dangerous member of the group.
Because he could take it, because like, not only could he like, yeah, just infinitely copy himself and just overload in like a giant like zombie like the zombies in World War Z, but he can also like copy, like he can make multiple Shigarakis. He can make multiple high ends.
He can copy the most dangerous people on the planet.
Yes.
So there's a reason why he's kind of priority number one after Shigaraki as far as hero attention goes. Because as we showed during the Toga fights, like once you get her cornered and you know what's coming, Toga's not that much of a threat. Just kind of depends on what blood she has on time. And Dabi's basically self-destructive. So
although Toga constantly does find herself like keep getting like she even though, yeah, she's only like, yeah, her quirk can only like, yeah, just distract people, but she's like, so she's like a surprise, she's like almost like too good of a fighter.
I wouldn't say good of a fighter. She relies too much on the element of surprise to win her battles.
Yeah, and then you get well first there's like a little bit of like Spinner. There's a little bit of Spinner's whole thing about like, yeah, you don't get a lot of it in the anime, but it's basically just like, oh, I was prejudiced because
I'm a Ninja Turtle, and it's like, I'm a Ninja Turtle, so people were prejudiced to me. That's bad.
I live in the South. Yeah,
bad.
I lived in the South. What did you expect?
Yeah.
So and then he's like, oh, I just want a place. Yeah, he wants a place to belong, and so he saw Stain. He's like, oh, Stain wants like Stain wants to remake the world.
He's a Ninja Turtle. I'm a Ninja Turtle. This works.
Yeah, Stain wants to recreate the world. Is like, oh, I'd like to live in that world. He ends up being with the League, even though the League are kind of like the opposite of Stain, but he ends up being like, oh, I like these guys. These guys are cool. These guys want to like create a better world, like at least a better world in like my like estimate of being like, oh, like anything is better than what my life is right now. So sure, I'll go along with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like I like this whole thing with Shigaraki being like, oh yeah, like he's constantly questioning, being like, oh, why, like I want to follow Stain. It's like, but this isn't what Stain is. But then in the end, he's like, oh no, like I do like Shigaraki, and I want to like see what he can do. I want to help him. Like,
I mean, I think it's half that. It's also half that he's afraid of Shigaraki after that point.
Kind of,
because I don't think it's strictly awe. I think it's also a matter of, oh, I kind of align myself with like the most destructive, crazy person around. I also better not cross him.
I don't know, because I mean, like the beginning of the League of Villains arc literally starts with him like in the manga grabbing him and being like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, what are we supposed to do?" It's like it shows like he isn't scared of him, and even like later on in the manga, they kind of like talk about like, oh yeah, like there's a moment where Spinner mentions how like him and Shigaraki used to always bond talking about video games. So it's like, I do think their friendship is genuine. It's like a thing. Yeah, it is like a thing.
I'm not sure I 100% believe that, but there's conflicting emotions there.
Yeah, I do think Spinner is like, again, like Twice. He is much more like He is much more on like that side of morality of like being like, oh, like if certain bad shit happens, he'll like be like, okay, do I really want to do this or not? And then it's like he just ends up, because ultimately like the league outweighs any morals. Ultimately, I think that's pretty much Spinner's whole thing. And also, very quickly, even though he doesn't do anything, I love Compress. Compress has the great line. Yes. He's like, "You didn't do anything. I was great at running away."
Yeah. And then we get to Shiggy.
Oh boy, more domestic abuse.
Oh boy.
So his backstory was actually handled very well in the anime, all things considered. Everything else.
All those scenes, yeah, all of those scenes were done excellently.
It was very well done.
Yeah, I do appreciate. Did you guys see the dub episode this past
Yes,
weekend?
I did. I saw the
Yes.
decision that they
Okay,
did with his voice, and I thought that was amazing.
Eric, it's something that not even the Japanese dub did a lot with. It's there in the Japanese version, but it's much more pronounced in the English version, which I appreciate. Because if you reader people who read the manga weren't paying attention,
Yeah.
Shigaraki before the point where he crushes his hands goes, his speech bubbles are very warbly black outlined compared to a normal speech bubble.
Yep.
At that point in the manga, they become normal speech bubbles. So Eric Vale very much changes his voice. It's still Shigaraki's voice, but very much changes his voice to signify that, and it works super well.
Yeah, no, it is like, yeah, that is such like an excellent detail. That I'm glad whoever, I assume it's probably, yeah, assume like Colleen, like
The
yeah,
director.
Colleen and like the VAs, like that was something they were like, okay, now we're gonna do this, and then it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably like, yeah, the best like decision that they've probably ever done in terms of like, yeah, in terms of VA
Really
directing.
elevating the source material.
And it's it's funny because it's like, yeah, because Eric Vale's voice, normal, like his original Shigaraki voice, sounds very different to his like normal performances. But like when he's talking like as calm Shigaraki, it's like, oh, I can hear the Eric Vale come out of him. Like I can hear him as his
Yes.
other characters,
Yeah.
which I think is like it's fun, unintentionally funny, but it's like, but it doesn't ruin it. It's be like, oh yeah, that is.
I mean, Eric Vale's funny thing is still his Trunksiness Sanji when he started that role.
But yeah, like you have like you get the full like backstory of like, oh, how did Shigaraki come to be? And it's like we already knew that, oh, he's the grandson of Nana Shimura, and you find out that, oh yeah, because since Nana abandoned her child, he became this basically a matriarchal dictator of like no talking about heroes. If you ever think about heroes, I'm slapping the shit out of you and putting you in the corner.
Which of course paints Nana in a not very flattering light.
Yeah, it makes Nana, yeah, it makes like
Hmm.
the whole Nana thing like, yeah, just a lot more grayer and just a lot more interesting of like.
Yeah, I wouldn't say gray because we don't have the context of what All for One was doing, so it's very much no. It feels very you just abandon your kid to do superhero work. It's like that's not cool. It's like even if it's for potentially justifiable reasons, you didn't explain it.
Yeah, no, it makes it
So
interesting. Yeah, because it makes it interesting in that fact that, yeah, it's like, I mean, it was very clearly the wrong decision to make of like, yeah, just abandoning your child. But it's also like you kind of, because like in like her dad, like, I mean, her husband had like just died right before, so it was kind of like this whole thing of fear of like, oh, I know All for One is scary as shit, and I don't want anything bad to happen to him, even though again something probably worse ends up happening. So that's why it's like it's ironically interesting how it goes, and
yeah.
I just think it's like it's such a interesting realistic portrayal of like this family drama because you have like the father being like just an absolute shithead, and every time like he leaves, then you have like the mom and the sister and the grandparents being like, okay, like no, it's okay, Tenko, and like trying to like help him and reassure him. But every time his father
It's
comes,
very
but every
real.
time his father comes back in, they're just on the side, just crying out, not doing anything. And every time, like the whole like the that big thing when he's when he's like actually beating the shit out of him, and he's just like, "Come on, somebody help me!" And all they can do is just sit back and cry and just not doing it. And it's like that the reason why he ends up hating everybody, not just his dad, because it's like, oh yeah, like they do good things to hide face, but it's like when the bad shit actually starts happening, all they can do is just sit back and like turn away, like try not to look. And it's like, yeah, like when things get really bad, and it is that is very realistic in a lot of family like ways of just
Hmm.
like there are a lot of, like the good family members try to like help out the people, but it's like but they still ultimately don't do anything to prevent the abuse from happening. And it's like then it's you see how like even though ultimately he doesn't hate him as much as his dad, but it's like you can see how like that whole hatred of I hate everyone like makes it make
Well,
sense.
You see where it stems from, yeah.
it's a cycle of abuse. So
Yeah, which but again leads to just the like when I was afraid to get to it, but it's like when his decay emerges, and I'm like, oh, I knew what was happening, but just when it happened, just you killing the corgi for like, why would you do that, Horikoshi? Why would you kill the first thing that
Well,
happens?
because it gets the most reaction. That's
I know
why.
it's why in a god it's like that makes sense, but it's like oh it was hard. It's so hard to watch, especially because again like it's quote unquote like it's censored in the fact that it's like it's decay and then blood rather than full on blood, but it's like no, it's still gruesome as fuck.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then it gets worse when it's like oh then GT touches Hana and it's like oh she collapses into nothing. And then yeah, everything, and there is that like the moment of like even after everything like bad is happening, and his mother still tries to run in and comfort him, and then which is versus Kotaro, and then the first thing he does is try to smack him with a stick, which is and then it's such kind of the brilliant move like oh he kills him by touching his face on his hand, and the hand that was always on his face
Mhm.
was his father's hand. So it's like the thing of like, oh, he's always kind of had like his father's hand covering up his face, and it's like, oh, that's such a, like a genius like kind of retroactive like reveal of like oh like the way all the hands work.
It's symbolic.
A face palming civilian breaks a wall. A face palming villain, more hands. The League of Villains. Shaggy.
Yeah, like that whole decay awakening scene, like the birth of Shigaraki. I think yeah that was done excellently. You have like all this thing of like him like
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
him
absolutely.
wandering the streets and like oh nobody helps because like they're like oh hero like which is like probably like the biggest thing of like oh the problems with the hero society of like oh nobody wants to help each other because they're like oh a hero will solve it and then no hero comes and it's like oh then it's like that's what leads to his whole like that well both it's that and then of course All for One coming in and being like I'm going to help. Like I'm going to basically like nurture because he's like, oh, normally people like let hatred go. Don't do that. keep keep
Yeah,
getting hated.
shut up, Luthor. Shut up, Luthor.
Faceless Luther. Can't see. We still can't see his. Although I mean, the anime has.
We saw the outline of his eyes
Yeah, no, I was
this
about to say
time.
like
It's more than we usually
the
get.
anime like has actually been showing like his face. It's like normally the manga doesn't, but it's like oh, we've gotten his eyes a couple times. And then of course then learning that oh, his name's Shigaraki because that's All for One's last name. Ooh, lore.
Ooh.
Yeah, and then yeah, because the first couple like bits of the fight against Redestro were just kind of like, we're just kind of like yeah, like there were some cool moments, but it's like it's not as like great as I feel like it could have been. But then like pretty much once Shiger yeah once he breaks the hand. And like you get it, and his hair turns full red, and he's laughing maniacally as everything crumbles around. Like that whole scene was done excellently.
Yes.
And then like when you mention like the Redestro looking like Doofenshmirtz, it's like it's also a thing of because the shading on Redestro on that scene like especially is like very like more detailed than anything in the entire like probably in the entire season. Of just like how
Redustro Incorporated.
just all of the black like just the black outlines of him is like real like it's like it pops like so much it's kind of distracting because it feels like no other character looked like this ever but it's like it is very striking of like and it helps like it helps the
Yeah.
visual direction like it's like visual direction like that where like when not much movement is happening I think is like that's super important of
It really elevates a scene that doesn't have a lot of animation in it. But
If
still.
I had a nickel for every time like I went against a character that had a face covering that came on and off easily, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
also red white hair Shigaraki is best
Yes.
yeah he looks so cool he looks so cool his white
It's very typical anime, but I don't care. It looks neat.
yeah, and it is such a great like kind of like ending of like that Redestro kind of realizes that well because he has the when he's fighting him and he's like why because his power is stress so it's like he holds in his stress and the more stress he gets the powerful he gets and while he's fighting Shigaraki he's like wait why am I feeling less stressed and it's like he has to keep forcing himself to feel stressed and then so it gets to the end he's like oh it's because I saw him he's like the symbol of liberation like Shigaraki is liberated from everything and so he's just he's just free and he's like oh he's the one we should follow and like Shigaraki has that moment where he's like wait a minute you have money it's like he doesn't even think of he doesn't think of the fact that he's like a power like they're powerful guys or he has resources or an army he's just like ooh money we can eat sushi yeah and then so you get the big thing of like the formation of the paranormal liberation front.
Yeah, so overall speaking, not the best season, but it's fine enough for most aspects. I didn't hate it. It's just Villain Academia was a step down from its manga counterpart, but makes up for it in the joint training, and just Endeavor has good moments, but is badly paced. Just to kind of give my generalized opinions on it.
It was good. Not awful, like not like the highs of the other seasons, but it was good. I hope the movie is also just as stellar. If we're talking about like time that was like definitely taken away from the main series.
I hope next year they don't make a movie because they need to make next season really good.
Yeah, it's funny because it's funny because we kind of made this thing like during one of the episodes last year. It'd be like, we were like, they can't make a third movie yet because there's nowhere for it to go. But then we forgot that, there's like literally a 2-month time skip in the manga. It's like, they could just plot the movie there. But now we're like, okay, there
is literally no place to.
There's literally no place to movie now.
Yeah.
So now it's like, pretty much just go all in on season 6. Because I mean, like the ending literally, like the I was surprised like how much like that they literally ended the season on like, everybody like being assembled together and being like, now we're going over there. Like I was expecting just to be like soon something's gonna happen, but it's like, no, we literally stopped like a couple minutes before the war happens. So it's like, oh boy. And it's like, and again, with how the anime paces things, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how exactly they decide to pace the war, because it's like, realistically, you probably could fit the war arc all in one season, but it's like, will they? And if
I mean, depends on what you're considering the war.
Well, the war and then that aftermath of the war.
I mean, it's going to depend entirely on whether they do 1 or 2 cores, which Hero Academia usually does 2. Because you're going to get stuff further than that if you do 2 cores.
Yeah, especially because I don't know if they'd be able to fit. Yeah, I don't think they'd be able to fit the entire war arc in just a 13 episode core. So I feel like
I think you could, especially because it's very action focused. So you could easily fit stuff into a section that would pace functionally fine. It's hard to say considering creative liberties are always taken with action scenes, just because the page versus motion animation is such a radically different medium to display it, so it just kind of depends a little bit on that front. But again, because it's so action focused, you can very much condense things to where it still works fine.
Yeah, I mean, like the perfect example is like joint training arc, where like you have like an episode that covers like 2 chapters, and then in My Villain Academia you have like an episode covering 4 plus chapters. So it's like they can pretty much decide whatever they want, like how quick or not they decide to have the chapters go.
Yeah, so we'll have to see, especially if they decide to do 2 cores.
I imagine it's probably going to be October 2022, since they've been usually doing that 1.5 year wait since season
probably,
3. Yeah, because season 4, because it was like summer in season 1, 2, and 3. Then season 4 was fall the next year, and then went back to spring the start of this year, and then so it's probably going to go back to fall, because I feel like 6 months to get to. I mean, if they were going to be starting in spring, we would have probably known by now. So, starting in fall probably makes the most sense.
Yeah, probably gives them just time to make it good.
I think so. So, anything to wrap up, or?
I think that's pretty much it. And we got through a lot. Like, surprisingly, not everything, but we went through a lot of the season.
Yep, this really was a My Hero Academia.
Nice. All right, so I assume we'll do something for the movie whenever we get to that.
Yeah, I would say So join us.
Yeah, probably.
So join us in a month when we come back here to talk about World Heroes Mission.